and the shadowed corridors of ancient myths, where gods toil like weary clerks and heroes navigate the bureaucracy of fate. A forgotten scroll unveils the untold drudgery behind Olympus's grandeur, from the Minotaur's blueprint approvals in Minoan, mazes to Zeus's stormy weather reports. Embark on a hilarious and enlightening odyssey that strips the divine veil from Greek legends, revealing that even immortals can't escape paperwork, family drama, and the grind of eternal life. What if the epic tales we cherish were just another day at the office for the gods? Asterisk. The labyrinth's shadows, daily life in Minoan Knossos, and the Minotaur's architectural legacy. Imagine yourself wandering the sun-baked hills of ancient Crete, around 1000 BCE, where the sea breeze carries the scent of olive groves and the distant crash of waves against rocky shores. You are stepping into the world of the Minoans, a civilization that thrived long before the classical Greeks you might know from school books. Their palace at Knossos wasn't just a royal residence. It was a sprawling complex of rooms, corridors, and courtyards that mirrored the intricate myths later woven around it, like the tale of the Minotaur, that half-man, half-bull creature said to lurk in a labyrinth. But let's set aside the drama for a moment and delve into the everyday realities that gave birth to such stories, the kind of details that historians pore over in dusty artifacts, revealing how ordinary people lived, worked, and survived in this Mediterranean cradle. The palace at Knossos, excavated by Arthur Evans in the early 20th century, was a marvel of Bronze Age engineering, covering about 20,000 square meters with over 1,300 rooms connected by winding hallways. You can picture yourself as a Minoan artisan navigating these passages, not in fear of a monster, but to deliver freshly fired pottery or bales of wool. The walls were adorned with frescoes depicting bull-leaping rituals, young athletes somersaulting over charging bulls, in what might have been religious ceremonies or athletic displays. These weren't mere decorations, they reflected a society deeply intertwined with bulls, symbols of strength and fertility. Archaeological finds show that bull horns, or horns of consecration, were placed on rooftops and altars, perhaps to invoke protection for the harvest or safe voyages across the sea. Daily life here revolved around a sophisticated bureaucracy that managed trade networks stretching from Egypt to the Cyclades Islands. Clay tablets inscribed in Linear A script still undeciphered today recorded inventories of grain, wine, and olive oil stored in massive pithoi jars that could hold hundreds of liters. As you go about your routine, you might be a scribe tallying shipments of saffron, a precious spice harvested from crocus flowers in the autumn fields surrounding the palace. Women who held significant roles in Minoan society oversaw weaving workshops, producing fine textiles dyed with purple from murex snails, a labor-intensive process that involved crushing thousands of shells for just a few grams of pigment. Children played in the courtyards with terracotta toys shaped like animals, while elders shared oral tales that blended fact with fancy, perhaps exaggerating the palace's complexity into a mythical maze to explain its disorienting layout to outsiders. Survival in this era meant adapting to the island's volatile environment. Earthquakes frequently shook Crete, as evidenced by the palace's multiple rebuilds, each layer incorporating stronger gypsum blocks and wooden beams for flexibility. You would have participated in communal repairs, hauling stones from quarries. Under the relentless sun, your hands calloused from ropes and chisels. Water management was key. An advanced system of clay pipes and cisterns collected rainwater, ensuring the palace's inhabitants estimated at up to 5,000 had enough for drinking, bathing, and irrigation during dry summers. Diet was simple yet nourishing: barley bread, figs, lentils, and fish caught in nets from the nearby coast, supplemented by wild game like deer hunted in the hills. Yet, beneath this orderly existence lurked uncertainties that fueled the myths. The Minotaur legend, possibly inspired by bull-masked priests performing rituals in the palace's dark storage rooms, hinted at human sacrifices or initiations. Historical records from later Mycenaean invaders suggest tributes of youths sent to Crete, echoing the story of Theseus and the 7 Athenian boys and girls. Was the labyrinth simply the palace's maze-like design, confusing to foreigners? Or did it conceal deeper secrets of power and control as you pause in a shaded alcove? Pondering these layers, one question lingers. How did this thriving society, with its unassuming routines, set the stage for a myth that would echo through millennia, influencing warriors and kings far beyond Crete's shores? Picture yourself back in the heart of Knossos, around 1800 BCE, where the palace hums with the quiet rhythm of daily tasks. Yet whispers of its mythical reputation begin to take shape. You're a Minoan trader now, standing in the bustling west, court where merchants haggle over amphorae of olive oil and intricately painted ceramics. The air is thick with the scent of drying fish and thyme from nearby herb gardens, and you can hear the clatter of looms from the women's quarters, weaving the threads that connect this island to distant lands. The palace, with its labyrinthine corridors, isn't just a home to kings or priests. It's a nerve center for a maritime empire, and you're part of the intricate web that sustains it. But beneath the surface of this orderly commerce, the seeds of the Minotaur myth are germinating. Rooted in the mundane yet profound realities of Minoan life, the Minoans were master seafarers, their cedarwood ships navigating the Aegean to trade with Egypt, Anatolia, and the Cyclades. You might spend your days checking cargo lists scratched onto clay tablets, ensuring barrels of wine or jars of honey reach their destinations. Archaeological evidence, like the Acrotiri frescoes from Santorini, shows these ships with square sails and rowers carrying goods that defined Minoan wealth. The palace's storerooms, cool and dimly lit, held surplus grain and oil, a buffer against famine or siege. These reserves were managed with meticulous care, as linear tablets reveal tallies of livestock and crops, suggesting a society obsessed with order and foresight. As a trader, you'd barter with foreigners who spoke strange tongues there, or at Knossos' grandeur perhaps sparking tales of an impregnable maze. Religion permeated every aspect of life, and you'd witness rituals that blurred the line between sacred and practical. Priests and priestesses, adorned in flounced skirts and gold jewelry, performed libations at altars, pouring wine or oil to honor deities like the great goddess, whose snake-handling statues were found in palace shrines. Bulls, central to these rites, were sacrificed in open courtyards, their blood collected in riten's ceremonial vessels shaped like animal heads. These acts weren't mere spectacle, they reinforced social cohesion, ensuring the community's survival through divine favor. Yet, the bull imagery, so vivid in frescoes and seals, might have confused outsiders, who saw masked priests in flickering torchlight and spun stories of a monstrous creature. Lurking within, the palace's architecture itself fueled such tales. Its multi-level design, with staircases spiraling into basements and light wells channeling sun into lower rooms, created a disorienting maze for newcomers. You'd guide visitors through narrow passages, past frescoes of dolphins and lilies, to audience chambers where rulers dispensed decisions. Earthquakes, frequent on Crete, forced constant repairs, and you'd join work crews reinforcing walls with ashlar masonry, a technique using precisely cut stones. Water systems, with terracotta pipes and drainage channels, were maintained to prevent flooding during winter rains, a testament to Minoan ingenuity. But these practical feats, so routine to you, might have seemed otherworldly to Mycenaean visitors, whose simpler hill forts paled in comparison. Socially, Knossos was egalitarian for its time. Women, as seen in frescoes, participated in public life, managing workshops or leading rituals. You might overhear them negotiating wool prices or teaching apprentices to dye cloth. With madder root, children trained in bull leaping, a rite of passage practiced in fields outside the palace, their laughter mingling with the bleating of goats. Yet external pressures loomed. Minoan dominance relied on trade, and disruptions like volcanic eruptions on Thera threatened supply chains. Did these stresses, combined with the palace's complexity, inspire myths of entrapment and sacrifice? As outsiders struggled to make sense of this enigmatic culture, as you load a ship bound for Rhodes, you wonder, how did the Minoans' practical, Brilliance and spiritual devotion intertwined to birth a legend that would outlive their civilization. Casting shadows of a beast across the ages, you stand at the edge of Knossos' grand central court around 1450 BCE. As the Minoan civilization nears a pivotal moment, the sun dips low, casting long shadows across the gypsum-paved courtyard, where bull-leaping ceremonies once drew crowds. You're a potter now, shaping clay vessels for olive oil, your hands dusted with the earth of Crete. The palace, with its maze-like corridors and vibrant frescoes, still hums with activity. But an undercurrent of change ripples through the air. The myth of the Minotaur, born from the daily rhythms and architectural wonders you've known, is about to intertwine with the twilight of Minoan dominance, leaving a legacy that shapes history in ways you could never foresee. The palace's decline began subtly. Archaeological evidence points to a catastrophic event, likely the Thera eruption, around 1600 BC, whose ash clouds and tsunamis disrupted trade routes you once relied on. Crops failed in ashen fields, and your pottery orders dwindled as exports slowed. The Minoans adapted as always, repairing earthquake-damaged walls and rerouting trade to new partners in the Peloponnese. But by 1450 BCE, Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, with their bronze swords and linear script, began infiltrating Crete. You notice their presence in Knossos, warriors in boar-tusk helmets bartering for your wares, their language replacing Linear A in administrative records. The palace, once a Minoan stronghold, became a Mycenaean hub, its storerooms now filled with their grain tallies. The Minotaur myth crystallized during this transition. The story of Theseus slaying a beast in a labyrinth likely reflects Mycenaean conquests, with the labyrinth symbolizing Knossos' confusing layout to mainlanders. You hear whispers of tribute suits sent from Athens, perhaps as hostages or laborers, not unlike the real workers who maintained the palace's water systems or harvested saffron. The bull imagery, so sacred to Minoans, was reinterpreted by outsiders as monstrous, a metaphor for a culture they couldn't fully grasp. Excavations reveal no human sacrifices, but ritual rooms with bull skulls suggest ceremonies that might have seemed ominous to Mycenaean eyes, fueling tales of a hidden creature. Life persisted despite the shift. You still fire your kilns, crafting pots for local use, though the vibrant frescoes fade under neglect. Women weave, children play, and priests pour libations, but the palace's grandeur wanes. By 1375 BCE, a fire possibly deliberate ravaged Knossos, leaving charred beams and shattered pithoi. You escape to the hills, joining others who carry Minoan skills to smaller settlements. The palace, abandoned, becomes a ruin, its corridors silent but for the wind. Yet, its legacy endures. Minoan art influences Mycenaean pottery, and their maritime knowledge shapes Greek navigation. The Minotaur myth, recorded in later epics, immortalizes Knossos as a place of mystery and power. Reflecting on this, you realize the myth wasn't just a story, it preserved the essence of a civilization. The labyrinth symbolized the complexity of Minoan life, its bureaucracy, architecture, and resilience. Today, Knossos inspires archaeologists and storytellers, reminding us how ordinary routines, pottery, trade, rituals can birth legends that outlast empires. The Minotaur, a blend of reverence and fear, asks us to consider how we misinterpret cultures unlike our own, turning their daily realities into enduring myths. What echoes of Knossos linger in our modern world, hidden in the stories we tell about the past? Nectar of the gods, ancient herbal brewing practices in Greek Templar step into the sacred precinct of a Greek temple around 700 BCE, where the air is heavy with the scent of crushed herbs and smoldering incense. You're a temple, attendant in a sanctuary dedicated to Demeter, goddess of the harvest, somewhere in the fertile plains of Attica. Your hands are stained with the juices of mint and fennel as you prepare offerings that the Greeks called nectar, not the mythical ambrosia of the gods, but a real, earthly concoction brewed from herbs, honey, and wine. These brews, central to religious rituals, were the lifeblood of temple life, connecting worshippers to the divine through meticulous, everyday tasks. Let's explore the quiet routines of these herbal practices, the labor of survival, and how They wove the myth of divine nectar into the fabric of ancient Greek society. Temples weren't just places of prayer, they were hubs of community and knowledge. As an attendant, you rise before dawn to gather herbs from the temple's garden, where rows of sage, thyme, and chamomile grow under the watchful eyes of priestesses. Archaeological finds, like those at the sanctuary of Artemis in Broron, reveal garden plots near sacred sites, suggesting plants were cultivated for both ritual and medicine. You pluck leaves carefully, mindful of the season mint in spring for vitality, myrtle in autumn for purification. These herbs, documented in later texts like Theophrastus's inquiry into plants, were boiled in bronze cauldrons over olive wood fires, their steam rising as offerings to appease deities or seek blessings for crops. Your role involves more than gathering, you're part of a chain of survival. Honey, harvested from clay beehives in nearby hills, sweetens the brews, a process requiring patience to avoid angering the bees. Wine, brought by farmers as tithes, is mixed in, its fermentation a trade secret of local vintners. You stir the mixture with a wooden ladle, following recipes passed down orally, perhaps blending barley water for a milder drink used in healing rituals. These concoctions weren't just symbolic. They sustained temple workers during long festivals and were distributed to the sick, as evidenced by votive offerings of ceramic cups. Found at healing sanctuaries like Epidaurus, the process was labor-intensive, but communal. You work alongside others, women grinding herbs with pestles, men hauling water from sacred springs. Socially, temples were inclusive. Women held prominent roles as priestesses, overseeing the brewing as a sacred duty. Children learned by watching, crushing lavender to release its calming oils. The brews, stored in amphorae sealed with resin, were offered during festivals like the Theseus, where women drank herbal infusions to honor Demeter's fertility. These rituals reinforced community bonds, ensuring survival through shared faith and resources. Yet, the myth of nectar, the drink of the gods, grew from these humble acts. Poets like Hesiod described nectar as divine, perhaps inspired by the transformative power of these herbal blends. To outsiders, the secretive recipes and fragrant steam wafting from temple altars might have seemed magical, elevating ordinary brews into legends of immortality. But what challenges did these attendants face in perfecting their craft? And how did their quiet labor shape the spiritual and physical health of their communities? You're back in the Temple of Demeter in Attica, around 650 BCE, standing in the flickering light of oil lamps as dusk settles over the sanctuary. As a temple attendant, your days are consumed by the meticulous art of brewing herbal concoctions, the so-called nectar that binds the mortal world to the divine. The air hums with the low chants of priestesses and the rhythmic grinding of mortars, blending sage and rosemary into pastes for sacred offerings. These brews, far from the mythical ambrosia of epic tales, are the product of practical knowledge and relentless labor, sustaining both the spirit and survival of your community. Let's delve deeper into the routines that shaped these practices, and how they wove the myth of nectar into the fabric of Greek life. Your work begins with the herbs themselves, sourced from the temple's gardens or foraged from the wild hills of Attica. Archaeological evidence from sites, like the sanctuary of Apollo at Delos, shows dedicated plots for medicinal plants, suggesting a systematic approach to cultivation. You learn to identify plants by touch and smell bitter wormwood for digestion, sweet fennel for fertility rituals. These were steeped in water or wine, often diluted to stretch resources, as clay tablets from Mycenaean Pylos list precise measurements of herbs for temple use. You measure handfuls carefully, knowing a misstep could weaken the brew's potency or offend the goddess. The process is slow, requiring hours of boiling and straining through linen cloths. Your hands calloused from repetitive tasks. The temple's economy depends on these brews. You witness farmers offering jars of honey or amphorae of wine as tributes, recorded by scribes on wax tablets for temple inventories. These gifts weren't just devotional. They ensured the temple's self-sufficiency, as surplus brews were traded for grain or tools. You assist in sealing amphorae with pine resin, preserving mixtures for months, a skill honed through generations. Some brews, infused with chamomile or poppy, doubled as remedies, distributed to pilgrims seeking healing during festivals like the Eleusinian Mysteries. Votive inscriptions from Corinth reveal thanks to Demeter for cures, hinting at the brews. Dual role as medicine and offering. Socially, the temple is a hive of collaboration. You work alongside women who dominate these rituals, their expertise in herbology respected across the community. Priestesses, often from prominent families, guide the process, their authority rooted in knowledge rather than wealth. Men haul firewood or repair cauldrons, while children sort dried leaves. Learning the craft through observation, this communal effort strengthened bonds, vital in a world where drought or plague could strike without warning. The brews, poured during libations or sipped in ceremonies, fostered unity, as shared rituals reminded everyone of their dependence on the land and the gods. Yet, the myth of nectar grew from these grounded practices. The Iliad's descriptions of gods drinking nectar likely drew from these fragrant, carefully crafted blends, their preparation shrouded in temple secrecy. To outsiders, traders, or pilgrims, the sight of veiled priestesses pouring steaming liquids at dawn might have seemed divine, fueling tales of immortal sustenance. But as you stir a simmering pot, you notice new pressures, trade disruptions from neighboring city-states, and whispers of rival sanctuaries perfecting their own brews. How did these challenges test the resilience of your temple's traditions? And what did they mean for the legacy of nectar in Greek culture? You stand in the sanctuary of Demeter in Attica around 600 BCE, as the golden age of Greek temples begins to shift under the weight of new political and cultural currents. As a temple attendant, you're tending a simmering cauldron, its steam, carrying the earthy aroma of thyme and honey. The herbal brews you craft, once the heart of sacred rituals, now face challenges from a changing world. Yet their legacy endures in ways that ripple beyond the temple's marble columns. The myth of nectar, born from your daily labor, has woven itself into Greek culture, but its story culminates in the quiet resilience of those who brewed it, and the lasting impact of their craft on history. The temple's brewing practices, once a cornerstone of spiritual and communal life, are tested by external pressures. You notice fewer tributes arriving, jars of wine and honey dwindle as city-states like Athens grow, diverting resources to urban markets. Archaeological finds, such as reduced votive offerings at sanctuaries by the 6th century BCE, suggest temples faced economic strain. You adapt, using wild herbs like oregano from nearby hills when cultivated stocks run low, and diluting brews with water to stretch supplies. The recipes, guarded by priestesses, are simplified, yet you maintain their ritual potency, pouring libations during festivals like the Theseus to ensure Demeter's favor for the harvest. The brew's medicinal role grows vital. Pilgrims arrive, weary from drought or illness, seeking your chamomile infusions for sleep or poppy blends for pain. As evidenced by healing inscriptions at Epidaurus, you distribute these remedies, your hands steady from years of practice, knowing they sustained the temple's role as a community anchor. Women, central to this work, pass knowledge to daughters, preserving herbology through oral traditions. Men repair storage amphorae, ensuring brews remain unspoiled. This collective effort, though routine, reflects a resilience that keeps the sanctuary alive amid growing competition from urban centers and rival cults, like those of Apollo or Asclepius. The myth of nectar finds its climax in this endurance. Poets like Pindar, writing in this era, elevate nectar to divine status, inspired by the fragrant steam and secretive rituals you perform. The reality, your meticulous blending of herbs and wine grounds these tales, but their mystique spreads through trade routes, reaching Persia and Egypt. As Greek colonies expand, your brews influence Hellenistic pharmacology, with texts like those of Hippocrates citing herbal remedies rooted in temple practices. The sanctuary's influence wanes as civic institutions rise, but its knowledge persists, embedded in medical treatises and communal rituals across Greece. Reflecting on this, you see how ordinary labor, crushing leaves, stirring pots, shaped a myth that outlasted the temple itself. These brews, born of necessity, became symbols of divine connection, their recipes echoing in modern herbalism and pharmaceutical traditions. The story of nectar reminds us that the mundane can inspire the eternal as everyday acts of survival, craft legacies that endure. How do the quiet contributions of ancient attendants like you continue to flavor our understanding of health, community, and the divine today? Weighing justice, Themis and the routine proceedings of Athenian law courts. Imagine yourself in Athens, around 450 BCE, standing in the bustling agora, where the air hums with the chatter of merchants and the clink of bronze coins. You're a citizen scribe tasked with recording the proceedings of the Athenian law courts, a duty that places you at the heart of a system revered as the embodiment of Themis, goddess of divine justice. The courts, housed in open-air structures like the Helioia, are not grand temples but practical spaces where ordinary Athenians gather to settle disputes over land, debts, or honor. These daily routines, though tedious, uphold the city's democratic ideals and fuel the myth of Themis's impartial scales. Let's step into the unassuming world of these court proceedings, where the grind of bureaucracy and human resilience shape a legacy of justice. The Athenian legal system, one of the earliest democratic institutions, relies on citizens like you to function. Each morning, you arrive at the agora, clutching a wax tablet and stylus, ready to transcribe cases. The courts handle everything from property disputes to accusations of impiety, with juries of 201 to 501 citizens drawn by lot of process using bronze clariteria machines, as archaeological finds from the agora confirm. You note the names of jurors, men over 30, who shuffle into the court, their cloaks dusty from the walk. They listen to plaintiffs and defendants, who speak for themselves, often stumbling over words or citing family feuds that stretch back generations. Your role is meticulous. You record arguments on land boundaries, like those found inscribed on stone markers in Atticus fields, or debts tallied on papyrus ledgers. The process is slow, with jurors voting by dropping bronze ballots into urns guilty or not guilty. Penalties range from fines to exile, and you inscribe the verdicts, ensuring accuracy for public archives stored in the metroon. Women, though excluded from juries, sometimes appear as witnesses in inheritance cases, their voices carrying weight in family matters as seen in surviving orations by Demosthenes. The courts operate daily except during festivals, processing hundreds of cases yearly, a testament to Athens' commitment to resolving conflicts through law rather than violence. The myth of Themis, goddess of order and fairness, hovers over this work. Her image, depicted on vases with scales and a serene gaze, inspires the ideal of impartiality. But the reality is messier. You observe jurors swayed by eloquent speakers or local rivalries. Yet the system structure random jury selection. Public trials minimizes bias. The courts also serve as a social glue, binding citizens through shared responsibility. You see farmers, potters, and traders debating alongside aristocrats, their voices equal under the law. This inclusivity, radical for its time, ensures Athens' stability as disputes are settled without bloodshed. Survival in this system depends on precision and trust. You sharpen your stylus, check your tablet's wax, and guard against errors that could invalidate a verdict. The court's reliance on written records, a novelty in a largely oral culture, underscores their importance. Yet, as you etch another case, you wonder, how did this daily grind of justice, rooted in the mundane, elevate Themis' scales into a symbol of fairness that echoed beyond Athens? You're back in the Athenian agora, around 30 BCE, as the sun climbs high, warming the stone benches of the Helioia court. As a citizen scribe, your wax tablet is nearly full, etched with the details of today's cases, disputes over olive grove boundaries or unpaid dowries. The air carries the scent of dust and roasted barley from nearby stalls, while the murmur of jurors and litigants fills the open-air court. The goddess Themis, symbol of divine order, looms in your mind, her scales representing the balance you strive to capture in your records. These daily proceedings, though repetitive, are the backbone of Athens' democracy, and your role in them reveals the intricate machinery of justice and survival in this bustling city-state. The court's routine is relentless. Each day, you arrive early to prepare, sharpening your stylus and checking the Pinocchio bronze identity plates used to select jurors. Randomly, as excavated examples from the Agora show, you record the names of 501 jurors, a mix of farmers, craftsmen, and merchants. Their faces weathered from lives spent under the Attic sun. Cases vary. A potter accuses a rival of stealing clay. Citing witnesses, a landowner disputes a neighbor's wall, pointing to stone markers inscribed with boundary terms. You transcribe speeches verbatim, noting pauses and gestures. As litigants have just one water clock timed hour to plead their case, a system described in Aristophanes' Wasps, verdicts are swift, with jurors casting ballots into clay urns, their clink signaling justice delivered. Your work supports a system that's both innovative and fragile. Athens courts, handling over 2,000 cases annually by some estimates, rely on citizen participation to function. You see men from all classes, tanners to aristocrats, debating with equal voice, a hallmark of democracy. Women, though rarely litigants, influence cases through testimony in family disputes, their words recorded carefully. The courts also manage public matters like tax evasion or impiety charges, as seen in the trial of Socrates decades later. You note fines paid in drachmas or punishments like temporary disenfranchisement, ensuring social order without resorting to violence. Archives in the metroon, where your tablets are stored, preserve these records. A bureaucratic triumph in an oral culture, Themis' influence is felt in this order. Her image, painted on courtroom vases, reminds jurors to seek fairness, though. Human flaws persist, bribes or favoritism occasionally taint verdicts, as orators like Lysias hint. Yet, the system's transparency with public trials and random juries curbs corruption. You witness community resilience. During harvest seasons, jurors double as farmers, rushing to fields after sessions. The courts also adapt to crises like the Peloponnesian War, when you record emergency decrees to fund triremes. These proceedings, mundane yet vital, knit Athens together, ensuring survival through collective responsibility. The myth of Themis' scales grows from this grind. To outsiders, like Persian traders visiting Piraeus, the sight of citizens judging peers in open courts seems almost divine, elevating routine disputes into a symbol of cosmic balance. But as you etch another verdict, you notice tensions. War strains resources, and populist orators sway juries with rhetoric over reason. How did these pressures challenge the ideal of justice? And what would they mean for the endurance of Themis' legacy in Athens? You stand once more in the Athenian Agora, around 400 BCE, as the sun sets behind the Acropolis, casting a golden glow over the Helioia court. As a citizen scribe, your wax tablet bears the weight of countless verdicts, each line a testament to the labor of upholding justice in Athens. The goddess Themis, with her unyielding scales, has guided your work, but now the city faces turmoil that tests the court's resilience. The Peloponnesian War has ended in defeat, and the democratic system you've served teeters on the brink. Yet, the legacy of these mundane proceedings, rooted in the daily grind of citizens like you, will endure, shaping the myth of justice and influencing history far beyond Athens' walls. The courts face unprecedented strain. You record fewer cases as war debts cripple the economy, and jurors, once eager, now grumble about meager pay, 3 obols a day, barely enough for bread. Archaeological evidence, like reduced inscriptions from the Agora, suggests a decline in court activity post-war. You adapt, using cheaper clay tablets when wax runs low, and note cases of treason or corruption, like those against generals after the Battle of Arginusae. The trial of Socrates in 399 BCE, which you witness, marks a turning point. His conviction for impiety reveals how fear and rhetoric can sway juries, challenging Themis' ideal of impartiality. Yet, the system persists with citizens still, gathering to settle disputes over inheritances or trade debts, their voices echoing in the open court. Your role remains vital. You transcribe speeches, ensuring verdicts are archived in the metroon, a practice that preserves Athens' legal tradition. Even under oligarchic coups like the 30 Tyrants, the court's democratic structure, random juries, public trials helps restore democracy by 403 BCE. As citizens reclaim their voice, women, though not jurors, continue to influence cases through testimony, their words shaping family law. As seen in orations by Isaias, the community's resilience shines through. Farmers and artisans, despite war's toll, return to the benches. Their participation a quiet act of survival that stabilizes the city. The myth of Themis' scales solidifies in this era. Philosophers like Plato, inspired by the courts, debate justice, while foreign visitors marvel at Athens' citizen-led system, contrasting it with Persian autocracy. The court's records, etched by scribes like you, influence later legal systems. From Hellenistic kingdoms to Roman tribunals, the principle of collective judgment, born in these dusty courtyards, becomes a cornerstone of democratic thought. Its echoes in modern jury systems are testament to its endurance. Reflecting on your work, you see how the mundane ballots, tablets, disputes crafted a legacy greater than any single verdict. Themis' scales, a symbol of balance, emerged from the labor of ordinary Athenians, their commitment to fairness enduring through war and upheaval. This story of justice asks us to consider how everyday acts of civic duty shape societies. Then, and now, what lessons from Athens' courts still guide our pursuit of fairness in a world far removed from the agora's sunlit benches, whispers from Delphi, prophetic rituals, and familial ties in Olympian lore? Picture yourself in the rugged hills of central Greece, around 700 BCE, trudging up the rocky path to the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. You're a temple attendant, your sandals worn from the climb, your tunic dusted with the chalky soil of Mount Parnassus. The air is crisp, scented with wild oregano and the faint smoke of sacrificial fires. Delphi is no ordinary place, it's the navel of the world, marked by the Omphalos stone, where mortals seek divine guidance through the Pythia, Apollo's oracle. Your daily tasks, from sweeping altars to preparing ritual herbs, are the quiet pulse of this sacred site, where myths of godly families intertwine with the practical labor of prophecy. Let's explore the unassuming routines that sustained Delphi's oracular power and gave rise to tales of divine kinship. The sanctuary hums with activity. As an attendant, you begin your day at dawn, cleaning the temple's marble steps where pilgrims leave offerings, terracotta figurines, bronze tripods, or jars of olive oil. As excavated artifacts reveal, you assist the Pythia, a woman chosen from local families, often past her youth, who channels Apollo's will. You prepare her ritual space, a small chamber in the temple's Edic, where she sits on a tripod over a chasm emitting faint vapors, possibly ethylene, as geological studies suggest, inducing a trance-like state. You mix laurel leaves and barley water for her to chew or drink, a practice noted in ancient texts like those of Plutarch, who served as a Delphic priest. Your work is meticulous. You sweep ash from altars where goats are sacrificed, their entrails examined for omens, a ritual rooted in survival, ensuring the gods' favor for crops or safe journeys. Pilgrims, from farmers to kings, arrive with questions about marriage, war, or trade. Their offerings recorded on clay tablets for temple archives, as found in Delphi's ruins. You guide them to wait in the sacred precinct, where they purify themselves in the Costolian spring. Its cold waters are shock to weary travelers. The Pythia's cryptic responses, delivered in verse, are transcribed by priests, and you ensure the papyrus scrolls are stored safely, preserving prophecies that shape city-state policies. The myths of Olympian gods, like Apollo's kinship with Artemis or Zeus, mirror the community you serve. Delphi's priests often came from local clans, their familial ties strengthening the sanctuary's authority. Much like the divine genealogies in Hesiod's Theogony, you witness this cohesion. Women weave ritual garments, men tend sacred olive groves, and children carry water for libations. These tasks, though ordinary, sustain a spiritual economy, with Delphi's wealth evidenced by gold dedications from Lydia's King Croesus funding temple repairs and community welfare. Yet, the myth of divine prophecy overshadows these routines. To outsiders, the Pythia's trances and Apollo's voice seem miraculous, weaving tales of godly families guiding mortal fates. As you arrange laurel branches, you wonder, how did these daily labors, so rooted in the earth, fuel a reputation that drew seekers from across the Mediterranean? You're back on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, around 650 BCE, in the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, where the morning mist clings to the olive groves. As a temple attendant, you move through the sacred precinct, your hands busy with the routine, tasks that keep this oracle's heart beating. The scent of burning laurel and roasted barley fills the air, mingling with the distant bleating of sacrificial goats. Your work, from preparing the Pythia's ritual herbs to guiding pilgrims, sustains the delicate balance between mortal hopes and divine will. Echoing the familial ties of the Olympian gods, these daily labors, so ordinary yet vital, weave the myth of Delphi's prophecies into the fabric of Greek life. And you're at the center of it all. Your day revolves around the Pythia's oracular sessions, held monthly on Apollo's sacred 7th day. You prepare her chamber, sweeping the stone floor and arranging laurel wreaths, their bitter scent believed to invoke divine clarity. As noted by ancient sources like Diodorus Siculus, you mix barley cakes and hemp seed infusions, practices hinted at in archaeological finds of ritual vessels at Delphi. The Pythia, a local woman of modest background, relies on you to ensure her ritual purity, her robes washed in the Costolian. Spring, her diet restricted to simple grains. You guide pilgrims, from Athenian envoys to Boeotian farmers, through purification rites, checking their offerings, bronze statuettes or jars of honey, catalogued in temple ledgers unearthed in modern excavations. The sanctuary's operations mirror a family's interdependence. Much like the Olympian pantheon's tangled lineage, you work alongside priests from Delphic clans, their kinship ties strengthening trust. As seen in the hereditary roles of the Hosioi, sacred officials, women weave ceremonial textiles, their looms clacking in nearby workshops, while men maintain the omphalos stone or repair altars with limestone from Parnassus quarries. Children carry water jugs, learning the rites through observation. This communal effort ensures survival. Delphi's wealth, amassed from offerings like Lydian gold, funds grain purchases during droughts, as inscriptions from the 7th century BCE reveal. Your role, though small, supports a network that binds city-states through shared faith. The myth of Apollo's prophetic family, his sister Artemis, Father Zeus, grows from these routines. To foreigners like traders from Corinth, the Pythia's cryptic utterances, delivered in a trance and interpreted by priests, seem divine, fueling tales of godly counsels. You transcribe her words on papyrus, preserving prophecies that guide decisions from colony foundations to wars, as recorded in Herodotus's accounts of Croesus's consultations. Yet, the sanctuary faces challenges. Rival oracles like Dodona compete for influence, and political pressures from rising powers like Athens strain Delphi's neutrality. You notice pilgrims arriving with larger entourages, their questions laced with strategic motives. As you arrange a tripod for the next session, you sense the weight of these shifts. The daily grind of rituals, so rooted in community and survival, upholds Delphi's aura. But external forces loom. How did the attendants and priests navigate these tensions to preserve the oracle's authority? And what would this mean for the enduring myth of Apollo's prophetic family? You stand once more in the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi, around 500 BCE, as twilight bathes the marble columns in a soft glow. As a temple attendant, your hands are calloused from years of grinding herbs and hauling water from the Costolian. Spring, the Pythia's oracular sessions, the heart of your daily labor, now face a world where political powers like Athens and Sparta vie for influence over this sacred site. The myth of Apollo's prophetic family, woven from your routine tasks, has cemented Delphi's fame, but its role is shifting. These unassuming rituals, rooted in community and survival, culminate in a legacy that outlives the sanctuary itself, shaping history and the stories we tell. The sanctuary's routines persist despite growing pressures. You prepare the Pythia's chamber, arranging laurel branches and mixing barley infusions. as archaeological finds of ritual cups confirm, but fewer pilgrims arrive. Their offerings, bronze pins or pottery dwindling as city-states centralize power, evidenced by reduced dedications in Delphi's 5th century records. You adapt, using local herbs when trade routes falter, and help priests ration the sanctuary's grain stores. The Pythia's prophecies, once sought for wars or colonies, now often address internal disputes, like Athens' democratic reforms, as noted in inscriptions about Cleisthenes' consultations. Your transcriptions, scratched onto papyrus, remain crucial, preserving oracles that guide Greece through turbulent times. The community's resilience shines through. Priests, bound by familial ties like the Olympian gods, maintain rituals with precision. Women weave sacred garments, their patterns, echoing myths of Artemis, while men repair altars damaged by earthquakes, a constant threat on Parnassus. Children, carrying olive oil for lamps, learn the sanctuary's rhythms, ensuring continuity. This collective effort, mirroring the divine kinship of Apollo's family, sustains Delphi's authority, even as rival oracles and skeptical philosophers, like Xenophanes, question its divine claims. The sanctuary's wealth, once vast, now funds civic projects, like rebuilding after a 548 BCE fire, as archaeological layers reveal. The myth of Apollo's prophetic lineage reaches its peak in this era. The Pythia's cryptic words, born from your humble preparations, inspire poets like Pindar to craft odes linking mortal and divine families. To outsiders, Macedonian envoys or Egyptian traders, Delphi's rituals seem otherworldly, elevating. Your daily grind into tales of godly councils. The sanctuary's influence endures in Hellenistic schools, where philosophers like Aristotle study its ethical pronouncements, and in Roman adoption of oracular practices. Your work, though routine, lays the foundation for concepts of fate and divine guidance that echo through Western thought. Reflecting on your labor, you see how the mundane sweeping altars, mixing herbs crafted a myth greater than any single prophecy. Delphi's legacy, rooted in the resilience of its attendants, reminds us that ordinary acts can shape extraordinary narratives. The stories of Apollo's family, born from your community's bonds, ask us to consider how our own daily efforts, quiet, uncelebrated, might ripple through time, influencing the myths we create today. What whispers of Delphi linger in our modern quests for meaning and connection? Theseus's quiet journey, maritime trade routes, and heroic myths in the Aegean yourself in the bustling port of Piraeus, around 800 BCE, where the salty tang of the Aegean Sea mingles with the scent of pine resin and drying fish. You're a merchant's apprentice, hauling amphorae of olive oil onto a wooden ship bound for Crete. The harbor teems with sailors, their voices a chorus of dialects from Athens, Naxos, and beyond. This is the world of Aegean trade, a web of maritime routes that sustains city-states and fuels myths like that of Theseus, the hero who sailed to slay the Minotaur. Your daily tasks loading cargo, mending sails are the quiet backbone of this era, weaving survival and legend into the fabric of Greek life. Let's explore the unassuming routines that powered these voyages and birthed heroic tales. The Aegean, a sparkling expanse dotted with islands, is a lifeline for communities like yours. Your ship, a pentaconta with a single square sail, carries goods essential for survival: barley from Attica, wine from Chios, pottery from Corinth. Archaeological finds, like shipwrecks off-roads, reveal cargoes of amphorae, some stamped with seals indicating their origin. You check these seals, ensuring the oil jars are secure, their clay stoppers intact to prevent leaks during the week-long journey. Navigation relies on stars and coastal landmarks, skills passed down by older sailors who point to the Cyclades peaks as guides. You learn to read the wind, adjusting ropes to catch the summer Meltemi breezes. Your work is grueling but communal. In Piraeus, women weave sailcloth from flax, their looms clacking in nearby workshops, while men tar hulls with pitch to ward off rot. Children scurry about, fetching water for crews or sorting fish for rations. The harbor's economy thrives on these efforts, with merchants bartering for goods, bronze tools from Cyprus, amber from the Baltic recorded on clay tablets in early Linear B script, as found in Mycenaean archives. Your role, though small, connects Athens to a network stretching to Egypt and Anatolia, ensuring food and resources flow even in lean years. The myth of Theseus emerges. From this maritime world, his legendary voyage to Crete with 7 youths and 7 maidens mirrors real tributes sent to Minotaurs, possibly as laborers or hostages, as suggested by Minoan Mycenaean trade records. You hear sailors' tales of Theseus navigating treacherous seas, perhaps inspired by captains who braved storms to deliver goods. The Minotaur, a symbol of Crete's power, reflects the awe and fear Aegean traders felt toward the Minoan palaces. Labyrinthine complexity. 2 foreigners docking in Piraeus. Your bustling port and sturdy ships seem heroic, their stories growing into epic narratives like those in the Iliad. Survival hinges on these voyages. You mend nets torn by rocks, ration dried figs for the crew, and pray to Poseidon for calm seas, offering wine at a harbour altar. Yet, as you load another amphora, you wonder, how did these routine journeys, so vital to Aegean life, transform into the heroic saga of Theseus, echoing across generations? You're back in the port of Piraeus, around 750 BCE, standing on the creaking deck of a pentaconta, the Aegean's waves lapping gently against its cedar hull. As a merchant's apprentice, your days are filled with the rhythmic tasks of trade tying, ropes, checking amphorae, and bartering with sailors from distant islands. The harbour buzzes with activity, the clatter of pottery, the shouts of dock workers, and the scent of tar and seaweed. These maritime routes, vital to survival, connect Athens to the wider world, and your labour fuels the myth of Theseus, whose heroic journey to Crete echoes the real voyages you undertake. Let's delve into the daily grind of this seafaring life, and how it shaped legends that endure. Your work centres on the ship's cargo, the lifeblood of Aegean trade. You load jars of olive oil, their clay sealed with wax, alongside sacks of barley and bundles of wool destined for Crete or Melos. Excavations of shipwrecks, like the one at Olympus, reveal similar cargoes in ingots, resin, even ostrich eggs, showing the vast network you're part of. You tally goods on a wax tablet, a skill borrowed from Mycenaean scribes, ensuring nothing is lost to storms or theft. Navigation is a communal effort. You watch the captain steer by the north star, while crewmen call out sightings of Naxos's cliffs. Storms are a constant threat, and you join prayers to Poseidon, pouring wine into the sea. A ritual etched on Attic vases. The harbour community mirrors the familial ties of Olympian myths. Women in Piraeus mend sails, their needles flashing us. They stitch flax, while men carve oars from pine, their hands sticky with pitch. Children sort fish for rations, learning knots from sailors. This interdependence, like the bonds between Theseus and his crew, ensures survival. Trade sustains. Athens, oil exchanges bring grain from the Black Sea, vital during droughts. As trade amphorae stamps confirm, you barter with Cycladic traders, swapping pottery for obsidian tools. Each deal strengthening ties across islands. The myth of Theseus grows from these voyages. His tale of sailing to Knossos, possibly inspired by tribute missions to Minoan Crete, reflects the real risks you face: pirates, squalls, or navigational errors. Archaeological evidence, like Minoan seals found in Attica, suggests regular contact with youths sent as labourers or diplomats, not unlike Theseus's companions. To foreign merchants, your sturdy ships and daring routes seem heroic, their stories inflating into epics. Bards in the Agora sing of Theseus's bravery, their words rooted in the courage of sailors who brave the Aegean's unpredictable waves. Yet, challenges loom. You hear of rival ports like Corinth drawing trade away, and storms that sink ships, disrupting supplies. The crew grows restless, rations of dried figs and salted fish running low. As you mend a torn sail under starlight, you feel the weight of these journeys, so ordinary yet perilous. How did this maritime world, with its relentless labour, cement Theseus's legend, and what would happen as new powers began to reshape the Aegean's fragile network? You stand on the weathered docks of Piraeus, around 700 BCE, as the Aegean sun dips below the horizon, painting the sea in hues of amber. As a merchant's apprentice, Your hands are rough from hauling amphorae and mending sails, your life entwined. With the maritime trade routes that sustain Athens, the port, once vibrant, now hums with uncertainty as new powers rise and old alliances falter. The myth of Theseus, born from the voyages you know so well, has taken root. But the real story of these routes, your daily grind, reaches its climax in a shifting world. These quiet labors, so essential to survival, leave a legacy that shapes. History and legend alike. The Aegean trade network faces mounting challenges. You load fewer ships as piracy surges, with raiders from the Peloponnese targeting cargoes of wine and oil. As hinted in Lineae tablets from Pylos, storms, like those that sank the Cape Gelidonia wreck, claim vessels, forcing you to ration barley and fish for crews. Yet, you adapt, bartering with new partners in Ionia, exchanging pottery for grain as amphorae stamps from Chios show. The community rallies, women weave tighter sails, men reinforce hulls with cedar, and children tally goods to prevent loss. These efforts, mirroring Theseus's crew's resilience, keep Athens afloat amid scarcity. The myth of Theseus reaches its peak in this era. His journey to Crete, slaying the Minotaur, reflects real voyages to Minoan Knossos, now fading under Mycenaean control. As archaeological layers suggest, you hear bards in the Agora weave tales of his heroism, inspired by captains who navigate treacherous seas. The tribute of youths, possibly apprentices like you sent to learn Minoan crafts, fuels the story, blending fact and fancy. To foreigners, docking in Piraeus, your port's bustling trade and daring sailors seem legendary. Their stories recorded in early epics, like those of Homer, spreading Theseus's fame. The trade route's legacy endures beyond this decline. Your skills not tying, star reading past later Greek mariners, shaping Hellenistic navies and Roman commerce, as evidenced by ship designs in Pompeian frescoes. Piraeus grows into a fortified port under the Mysticals, its docks a testament to your era's foundations. The myth of Theseus, rooted in your voyages, inspires Athenian identity, with festivals like the Orchophoria honoring his return. Your labor, though mundane, connects islands and cultures, fostering a maritime tradition that outlives empires. Reflecting on your work, you see how ordinary tasks, loading jars, weathering storms, crafted a hero's saga. Theseus's myth, born from the Aegean's waves, reminds us that legends grow from the resilience of everyday people. Your journeys, uncelebrated yet vital, ask us to consider how our own routines, quiet, persistent, shape the stories future generations will tell. What echoes of these maritime labors linger in our modern world, where trade and tales still bind us across vast seas? Ambrosia's humble origins, agricultural cycles, and divine sustenance in rural Greece. Picture yourself in a rural valley of Boeotia around 800 BCE, where the sun rises over rolling fields of barley and olive groves. You're a farmer, your hands rough from wielding a wooden plough, your tunic damp with morning dew. The air carries the scent of freshly turned earth and blooming wildflowers, a quiet symphony of life in ancient Greece. Your days revolve around the agricultural cycles that sustain your village, cycles that inspired the myth of Ambrosia, the divine food of the gods. These mundane tasks, sowing, harvesting, grinding grain, are the heartbeat of survival, weaving the human struggle into tales of immortal sustenance. Let's step into this unassuming world where daily labor birthed a legend. Your life follows the rhythm of the seasons. In autumn, you plow fields with oxen, breaking the hard soil to plant emmer wheat, as evidenced by carbonized seeds found. In the Salian settlements, you scatter barley by hand, praying to Demeter for rain, a ritual marked by clay figurines left at small altars, as seen in archaeological digs at Eleusis. Spring brings pruning of olive trees, their gnarled branches, yielding oil for cooking and trade, stored in pithoi jars unearthed across rural sites. Summer is for harvesting, your sickle flashing as you cut stalks under the blazing sun, joined by neighbors who share the labor to ensure everyone's survival. The village thrives on this communal effort. Women grind grain into flour using stone querns, their steady rhythm echoing through mud brick homes, while men press olives in wooden presses, the oil collected in ceramic vats. Children herd goats to pastures, their milk and cheese vital for lean months. As pastoral tools from Boeotian sites suggest, you barter surplus wheat for pottery or salt at local markets. A system recorded in early Greek inscriptions, these cycles, dictated by the land's demands, foster resilience, with families storing grain in clay-lined pits to guard against drought, a practice confirmed by excavations in Attica. The myth of ambrosia, the god's food granting immortality, grows from these routines. Hesiod's Theogony describes ambrosia as divine, perhaps inspired by the life-giving harvests you toil for. To outsiders, traders, or poets visiting your village, the sight of golden wheat fields or glistening olive oil might seem miraculous, elevating your labor into tales of divine feasts. Festivals like the Theseus, where women offer grain, cakes to Demeter, reinforce this connection, blending survival with spirituality. Your simple meals, barley bread, figs, and cheese, sustain body and soul, mirroring the sacred sustenance of the gods. Survival hinges on precision and cooperation. You repair sickles with flint blades, check soil for moisture, and watch the sky for signs of storms, offering libations of wine to Zeus. Yet, as you stack sheaves in the fading light, you wonder, how did these agricultural rhythms, so rooted in toil, inspire a myth of divine nourishment that captivated the Greek imagination? You're back in the sunlit fields of Boeotia, around 750 BCE, knee-deep in the rhythms of rural life. As a farmer, your days are shaped by the land ploughing, sowing, and harvesting under the vast Greek sky. The scent of ripe barley and crushed olives lingers as you stack sheaves beside your mud brick. Home, your labor, shared with neighbors, fuels the village's survival and feeds the myth of ambrosia, the divine sustenance of the gods. These agricultural cycles, so ordinary yet essential, knit your community together, their quiet routines inspiring tales of immortal feasts. Let's delve deeper into the daily grind that sustained ancient Greece and wove the seeds of legend. Your work follows the season's relentless pace. In winter, you repair plows and sharpen sickles, using flint blades traded from nearby villages. As tool caches from Theseus show, spring demands pruning grapevines, their fruit destined for wine, a staple for both meals and offerings, as seen in amphorae from Attic sites. You check soil moisture, digging small trenches to channel rainwater, a technique evidenced by irrigation ditches in Boeotian fields. Harvest season brings long days, your family joining neighbors to reap wheat, the air filled with the thud of threshing flails. You store grain in clay-lined pits, a practice revealed in archaeological digs. Guarding against famine or drought, the village pulses with communal effort. Women knead barley dough, baking flatbreads on stone hearths, their smoke curling through thatched roofs. Men press olives, the oil's golden hue a currency for trade, bartered for salt or wool at markets, as early Greek ledgers suggest. Children herd goats, their milk churned into cheese, a vital protein source. This interdependence, like the familial bonds of Olympian gods, strengthens resilience. You share tools and labor during planting, ensuring no family goes hungry, a system that sustained rural Greece through lean years, as evidenced by surplus storage in excavated granaries. The myth of ambrosia grows from this toil. Poets like Homer, visiting rural festivals, describe ambrosia as the god's food, perhaps inspired by your harvest's golden wheat, rich oil, sweet figs. To traders from Corinth or Thebes, your fields seem bountiful, their produce almost divine, fueling stories of celestial banquets. At rituals like the Panathenea, you offer grain cakes to Athena, mirroring ambrosia's sacred role as votive. Reliefs depict these ceremonies, blending survival and spirituality, reinforce community ties, with women leading songs and men pouring wine libations to ensure fertile seasons. Yet, challenges test your endurance. You notice poorer yields as soils tire, a problem noted in Hesiod's works and days, urging crop rotation. Locusts or sudden frosts threaten crops, and you pray to Demeter, scattering seeds at her altar. As you stack barley under starlight, you feel the weight of these cycles, so vital yet precarious. How did these rural labors, so grounded in necessity, shape a myth of divine sustenance? And what would happen as urban centers began to pull resources away from villages like yours? Deek's unyielding balance. Dispute resolutions in archaic Greek villages. Imagine yourself in a small village in Theseus, around 750 BCE, where the air smells of freshly baked barley bread and the distant bleating of goats echoes from the hills. You're a village elder, your cloak dusted with earth from morning field work, now sitting under an ancient olive tree to mediate a dispute between neighbors. The goddess Dike, embodiment of justice and moral order, looms in the collective mind, her balance guiding your words. In this archaic world, before the grand courts of Athens, disputes over land, livestock, or honor are settled through communal gatherings, their simplicity shaping the social fabric. Let's step into the quiet routines of these village resolutions, where daily life and divine ideals intertwine to create myths of fairness. Your role as an elder is central to village stability. Disputes are common. A farmer claims his neighbor's goats trampled his wheat, or two families argue over a shared well's water rights. You convene a meeting in the village agora, a cleared space near the well, where locals gather on stone benches. Archaeological finds, like boundary stones from Thessalian fields, show how land disputes were marked with inscribed markers, their words etched in early Greek script. You listen to both sides, each presenting witnesses, often relatives or shepherds, who recount events with earnest gestures, their voices carrying the weight of community trust. The process is informal but deliberate. You question the parties, drawing on oral traditions of fairness, as no written laws yet exist in these villages. Hesiod's works in Days, written around this time, describes similar scenes, urging just resolutions to avoid Deek's wrath. You weigh evidence, hoof prints in the field, water levels in the well, or sworn oaths to Zeus, sealed with a libation of wine poured on the ground, as ritual pottery shards suggest. Resolutions might involve dividing land, sharing water, or offering a goat as compensation, decisions recorded on clay tablets for village memory. As found in early Greek settlements, the community's survival depends on these gatherings. Women, though rarely mediators, provide testimony in family disputes, their words respected. As seen in later inscriptions from nearby Peleus, men repair boundary fences post-verdict, while children fetch water or firewood, learning justice through observation. These meetings, held after harvests or during festivals, reinforce bonds, ensuring no feud escalates to violence. You offer barley cakes to Deek's small altar, a practice mirrored in rural shrines, tying human fairness to divine order. The myth of Dike, daughter of Zeus, grows from these routines. To traveling traders, your village's calm resolutions seem almost sacred, inspiring tales of a goddess who watches over human morality. The reality your patient listening. Neighbors' compromises grounds these stories, yet they elevate your work into legend. As you settle another dispute under the olive tree's shade, you wonder, how did these humble gatherings, so rooted in daily life, shape a myth of justice that resonated across Greece? You're back in the Thessalian village agora, around 725 BCE, seated under the sprawling branches of the olive tree, its leaves rustling in the evening breeze. As a village elder, your role in resolving disputes over grazing rights or stolen grain keeps the community knit together, reflecting the balance of Dike, goddess of justice. The air carries the scent of wood smoke and barley, while neighbors gather, their faces lit by flickering torches. These gatherings, though routine, are the lifeblood of your village, ensuring survival through fairness and cooperation. Let's delve deeper into the daily rhythms of these resolutions, where mundane acts of mediation weave the myth of divine order into archaic Greek life. Your days are filled with disputes, small but vital. A shepherd accuses another of letting sheep stray into his pasture, pointing to trampled grass as evidence. A widow claims her brother-in-law withheld her share of inherited olives. You listen, patiently as described in Hesiod's works and Days, questioning witnesses, farmers or goatherds who swear oaths by Zeus, their hands on a stone altar. Archaeological finds, like boundary markers from Theseus inscribed with ownership terms, guide your rulings. You propose solutions, dividing grazing land or redistributing olive jars. decisions scratched onto clay tablets as excavated fragments. From early Greek villages show ensuring transparency. The process relies on community trust. You call on neighbors to verify claims, their testimony rooted in shared knowledge of fields and flocks. Women, respected in family matters, recount inheritance details, their voices carrying weight, as later inscriptions from Peleus like Dreros suggest. Men repair fences post-verdict using wooden stakes, while children fetch water for oath rituals. Learning fairness through observation, these gatherings, often held after planting or during festivals like the Aperturia, double as social bonds, with families sharing bread and wine afterward, reinforcing unity vital for survival in lean seasons. The myth of dike grows from this labor. To traders from Ionia, your village's orderly resolutions free of violence seem almost divine, inspiring tales of a goddess who punishes injustice. Votive offerings, like terracotta figurines of scales found at rural shrines, link your work to her image. Your rulings, though grounded in practical compromise, elevate everyday disputes into a narrative of moral order echoed in early epic poetry. The community's resilience shines, even during droughts when grain disputes rise. You mediate too. Ensure fair distribution, as storage pit records from Boeotia indicate. Yet, challenges emerge. You notice tensions as larger Peleus like Thebes demand tributes, straining village resources as early Greek inscriptions hint. Feuds over scarce water or land grow heated, testing your patience. Some elders accept. Bribes olives or wolf-threatening Deeks balance, a concern Hesiod warns against. As you inscribe another verdict, torchlight casting shadows, you feel the weight of maintaining fairness in a changing world. How did these village mediators, with their unassuming routines, uphold Deeks' ideals against growing pressures? And what would this mean for the myth of justice in Greece's future? Hades' ledger, bureaucratic management of the underworld and Greek burial customs. You settle into the quiet hush of evening. Imagine yourself wandering the shadowed corridors of ancient Greece, where the boundary between life and death was not a dramatic chasm but a meticulously managed threshold. In the myths that shaped Hellenic thought, Hades ruled the underworld not as a tyrannical spectre of doom, but as a stern administrator overseeing an eternal bureaucracy. This realm, known as the House of Hades, was less about fiery torments and more about orderly processing, a reflection of the Greeks' own societal emphasis on structure and record-keeping. You might picture Hades seated at a vast ledger, his gaze steady and impassive, tallying the souls that arrive daily from the sunlit world above. But to understand this, we must delve into the everyday rituals that bridge the mortal coil to the afterlife. Rituals rooted in historical practices that reveal the Greeks' profound respect for the dead. In the bustling city-states like Athens or Sparta around the 5th century BCE, death was an inevitable part of communal life, handled with a blend of solemnity and practicality. When a loved one passed, the family didn't descend into chaotic grief. Instead, they followed a prescribed sequence of customs that ensured the soul's smooth transition. You would first witness the prophesis, the laying out of the body. Relatives, often women, washed the corpse with water scented by olive oil and herbs simple. Locally sourced items like thyme or myrtle, harvested from the rocky hillsides. The body was anointed to preserve it briefly against the Mediterranean heat, then dressed in white garments, symbolizing purity. Coins, typically obols, were placed on the eyes or in the mouth. A fee for Charon, the ferryman, whose mythical role mirrored real-world tolls on trade routes. This wasn't mere superstition. It stemmed from a cultural need to equip the deceased for their journey, much like packing provisions for a long voyage. As you observe, the household transforms into a space of muted activity. Mourners gathered, their laments controlled by law in places like Athens, where Solon's reforms limited excessive displays to prevent social unrest. Professional mourners, hired from lower classes, chanted dirges that echoed through narrow streets, their voices rising in rhythmic patterns passed down generations. The ekphra followed the funeral procession at dawn, when the city was still asleep. You walk alongside the bier, carried by family members on foot or by cart for the wealthy. winding toward the necropolis outside the city walls. Graves were simple pits or stone-lined chambers, marked by stalactite slabs etched with epitaphs detailing the deceased's lineage, occupation, and virtues. A potter from Corinth might be remembered for his steady hand in crafting amphorae, or a farmer for his diligence in tending olive groves. These inscriptions, preserved in museums today, offer glimpses into ordinary lives. Here lies Eutychia, beloved wife and mother, skilled in weaving wool from our flocks. Burial goods accompanied the body, practical items like pottery vessels, filled with oil or wine, tools of the trade, or figurines of daily life. In Minoan and Mycenaean precursors, dating back to 1600 BCE, tombs held bronze mirrors, ivory combs, and even board games, suggesting beliefs in an afterlife that mirrored earthly routines. Cremation gained popularity during the geometric period, around 900 BCE, with ashes collected in urns and interred. A shift influenced by resource scarcity and hygienic concerns in growing populations. You can almost smell the pyre's smoke, fueled by pine wood from nearby mountains, as priests invoked Hades and Persephone for safe passage. Yet, this administrative underworld wasn't without its hierarchies. Myths describe realms like the asphodel, meadows for average souls, vast, foggy fields where the dead wandered aimlessly. Much like retirees in a quiet village, Elysium awaited the virtuous, a paradise of mild labors and communal feasts, while Tartarus held the wicked in eternal, if bureaucratic, punishment. Historical texts like Homer's Odyssey portray Odysseus consulting the dead through rituals at blood-filled pits, highlighting necromancy as a regulated practice tied to oracles. Hades himself, brother to Zeus and Poseidon, embodied this detached oversight. Unlike his flamboyant siblings, he rarely ventured above, content with his domain's ledgers. But what compelled the Greeks to envision death as such a methodical affair? And how did these customs evolve under Persian influences or philosophical shifts? As you ponder the ledger's endless entries, one question lingers. Could the underworld's bureaucracy hide deeper secrets about judgment and redemption? As you linger in the dim corridors of ancient Greek thought, the underworld's bureaucratic machinery hums quietly, its ledgers expanding with each soul's arrival. Hades, the unyielding overseer, was not merely a mythical figure but a mirror to the Greeks' obsession with order, even in death. You can almost hear the scratch of a stylus on papyrus, as priests and scribes above ground recorded the rituals that ensured a soul's proper cataloguing below. In the 5th century BCE, Greek burial customs were not just about honoring the dead. They were a societal contract binding families, city-states, and the divine in a web of mutual obligation. These practices, steeped in mundane detail, reveal how deeply the Greeks integrated death into the rhythm of daily life, treating it as another civic duty to be meticulously executed. Beyond the prophesis and ekphra described earlier, the living maintained ongoing relationships with the dead through regular commemorative rites. You might stand in a necropolis, where families gathered on anniversaries or festival days like the Anthesteria to pour libations, wine, milk, or honey onto graves. These offerings, detailed in archaeological finds from Athens' Kerameikos cemetery, were practical yet sacred, using clay vessels mass-produced by local potters. The act wasn't ostentatious, it was as routine as tending a field, ensuring the deceased remained placated and didn't haunt the living as restless shades. Such fears were grounded in real-world consequences neglected graves could invite. Divine displeasure believed to manifest as crop failures or family misfortunes. Inscriptions from the period warn of fines for littering burial grounds, reflecting civic laws that treated cemeteries as extensions of the polis. The underworlds. Bureaucracy, as depicted in myths, paralleled these earthly systems. Charon's fairy, for instance, wasn't just a poetic image but a nod to Greece's regulated waterways, where tolls were common for crossing rivers or harbors. The obol placed in a corpse's mouth, often a small bronze coin no larger than a modern dime, symbolized this transaction, its value negligible but its presence non-negotiable. Excavations in Thessaly and Boeotia have unearthed skeletons with such coins, confirming the practice's widespread adoption by the 6th century BCE. Similarly, the judges of the underworld Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus reflected Greece's own judicial systems. In Athens, the Areopagus court handled serious crimes with a gravitas that echoed these mythical arbiters, who weighed souls against unwritten codes of virtue and vice. This bureaucratic lens extended to how Greeks viewed the afterlife structure. The asphodel meadows, described in Hesiod's works, weren't a place of torment, but of monotony, where souls performed repetitive tasks akin to their earthly labors, spinning wool, grinding grain, or tending spectral flocks. Archaeological evidence from Mycenaean Tholos tombs, with their inventories of tools and domestic goods, suggests this vision of continuity predated classical Greece. For the elite, Elysium promised a slightly better afterlife with feasts and games, not unlike the symposiums of Athens' wealthy. Yet, even here, the emphasis was on order, not opulence. Tartarus, reserved for the worst offenders, was less about fiery punishment and more about eternal isolation, a fate mirroring exile in Greek society. These practices weren't static. By the 4th century BCE, influences from Persia and Egypt, encountered through trade and conquest, began reshaping Greek burial customs. Cremation urns grew more elaborate, adorned with motifs borrowed from Eastern art, while philosophical schools like the Pythagoreans introduced ideas of the soul's reincarnation, challenging traditional views of Hades' domain. You might wonder how these shifts affected the average Greek, whose simple grave and modest offerings anchored their family's honor. Did the underworld's ledgers adapt to these new beliefs? Or did Hades' meticulous records begin to falter under the weight of change? As you stand at the edge of the underworld's vast ledger, the faint echo of Hades' meticulous record-keeping lingers in the air, a testament to the Greeks' need to impose order, even on the chaos of death. By the 4th century BCE, the rituals and beliefs surrounding burial customs were not just personal acts of remembrance, but a collective framework that reinforced social cohesion. These practices, so ordinary in their execution, carried profound weight, ensuring the dead were neither forgotten nor disruptive to the living. You can imagine families returning to graves year after year, their offerings of oil and barley as routine as paying taxes, yet each act was a thread in the fabric of Greek identity, weaving the mortal and divine into a single tapestry. The culmination of these burial customs lay in their long-term maintenance, a duty that extended beyond the immediate funeral. In Athens, for instance, the genos, or clan, took collective responsibility for ancestral tombs, cleaning and decorating them during festivals like the Genesia, a public day of honoring the dead. You might see a potter's wife, her hands calloused from years of shaping clay, carefully placing a new leucithos, a slender vase filled with oil beside her husband's stele, its white ground painting depicting a quiet farewell scene. Such vases, excavated from Attic graves, show everyday moments: a woman spinning wool, a child with a pet bird, or a warrior polishing his shield. These images weren't grandiose, they celebrated the mundane, suggesting that life's value lay in its small, persistent routines. Yet, the underworld's bureaucracy faced challenges as Greek society evolved. The rise of philosophical schools, particularly Plato's Academy, and the Orphic mysteries introduced ideas that questioned Hades' static ledgers. Orphism, with its focus on purification and the soul's cycle of rebirth, suggested that the afterlife wasn't a permanent assignment to asphodel or Elysium, but a journey toward divine unity. This clashed with older beliefs, creating tension. Could a soul, once recorded in Hades' books, be erased or reassigned? Archaeological evidence from southern Italy, where Orphic gold tablets were buried with the dead, reveals instructions for navigating the underworld, advising souls to drink from the pool of memory rather than Lether's waters of forgetfulness. These tablets, inscribed with terse poetry, hinted a growing belief in personal agency over one's eternal fate, a shift that mirrored Greece's increasing individualism. The Persian Wars and subsequent cultural exchanges further complicated the underworld's narrative. By 400 BCE, Greek elites adopted elaborate sarcophagi inspired by Persian designs, while poorer families stuck to simple pit graves. This disparity reflected broader social changes, as wealth from trade and conquest stratified society. Yet, even the humblest graves held offerings, terracotta figurines, a single coin, or a handful of almonds, proof that every Greek, rich or poor, sought to secure their place in Hades' domain. The bureaucracy of death, like the polis itself, was inclusive in its demands but unequal in its execution. Reflecting on this, the Greek obsession with death's administration feels oddly modern, their rituals practical, repetitive and communal parallel our own systems of record-keeping, from birth certificates to tax forms. Hades' ledger, with its endless entries, reminds us that societies thrive on order, even when confronting the unknown. The Greeks' burial customs, rooted in the ordinary, ensured that every life, no matter how small, left a mark. But as new ideas reshaped their world, one wonders, did Hades' meticulous system endure? Or did the rise of philosophy and foreign influences blur the lines of his eternal records? The answer lies not in myth but in the quiet graves that still whisper of lives long past. Poseidon's currents, navigational charts and seafaring regulations in archaic Greece. You drift on the sun-dappled waves of the Aegean Sea. Imagine yourself aboard a creaking pentaconta, its 50 oars dipping rhythmically into the water. Guided by the steady hand of a Greek navigator in the 7th century BCE, the realm of Poseidon, god of the seas, was no mere myth to these mariners. It was a living force, embodied in the unpredictable currents and sudden squalls that shaped their lives in archaic Greece. Seafaring was not just a means of trade or conquest, but a complex web of practical knowledge, civic regulations, and unspoken rituals that ensured survival on the open water. To understand this world, you must immerse yourself in the daily routines of sailors, whose navigational charts and maritime laws were as vital as the ships they sailed, anchoring Greece's prosperity in the mundane details of maritime life. Picture the bustling port of Piraeus, Athens' gateway to the sea, where merchants haggled over amphorae of olive oil and grain, while shipwrights hammered cedar planks into sturdy hulls. These vessels, often no longer than 30 meters, were built for durability, their pine and oak frames sealed with pitch from Theseus forests. You might overhear a captain consulting a periplus, a written guide listing ports, distances, and coastal landmarks. These early navigational charts, though not maps in the modern sense, were meticulous records of safe anchorages and hazardous reefs, passed down orally before being inscribed on papyrus or leather. Sailors relied on landmarks, like Mount Athos, Jack Peak, or the white cliffs of Naxos, visible from miles away, to chart their course. At night, they turned to the stars, Ursa Major's steady arc, or Orion's bright belt, using rudimentary celestial navigation techniques honed through generations of trial and error. Seafaring was governed by strict regulations, reflecting the Greeks' need to impose order on Poseidon's chaotic domain. In Corinth, a major maritime hub, port officials known as liminarchoi oversaw harbor traffic, collecting dues based on a ship's cargo weight, typically measured in talents, roughly 26 kilograms of silver for a large shipment. These fees funded harbor maintenance, from dredging silt to repairing stone moles that protected ships from winter storms. Legal codes, etched on stone tablets in city agoras, outlined penalties for overloading vessels or dumping waste at sea, practices that could endanger entire crews. Excavations at Theseus reveal inscriptions detailing fines for captains who ignored docking protocols, a reminder that even the seas were subject to civic bureaucracy. The human element of this maritime world was equally compelling. Sailors, often drawn from lower classes or freed slaves, faced grueling conditions. You can almost feel the salt-stiffened ropes in their hands as they hold sails made of woven flax, their diets limited to barley bread, dried fish, and watered wine stored in clay jars. Superstitions guided their actions. Offerings of honey, cakes to Poseidon, were tossed overboard before departure, and dolphins, his sacred messengers, were watched for signs of divine favor. A sudden squall of dolphins might signal safe passage, while their absence could prompt a crew to delay sailing. These rituals, grounded in practical observation, blended faith with survival strategy, yet the sea was unforgiving, and not every voyage ended in safe harbor. Shipwrecks, like those excavated off Antikythera, reveal cargoes of bronze statues and pottery lost to Poseidon's wrath. As you imagine a sailor scanning the horizon, clutching a periplus, one question surfaces: how did these mariners balance their fragile knowledge against the sea's vast unknowns? And what secrets did their charts hold that we've yet to uncover? As you sway gently on the deck of an archaic Greek merchant ship, the salty breeze carries the weight of Poseidon's domain, where every journey was a negotiation with the sea's capricious will. In the 7th and 6th centuries BCE, Greek mariners didn't just sail, they operated within a sophisticated system of navigational knowledge and regulations that shaped their survival. The periplus, that unassuming list of ports and landmarks, was more than a guide, it was a lifeline, binding sailors to the collective wisdom of generations. You can almost see the weathered hands of a captain tracing its entries, written in the tight script of a scribe, detailing the currents off Chios or the shallow shoals near Lesbos. These documents, though rarely preserved due to their perishable materials, were the backbone of Greece's maritime dominance, enabling trade networks that stretched from the Black Sea to Egypt. Navigational knowledge was hard-won, built on observation and shared experience. You might picture a grizzled sailor teaching his apprentice to read the sea's surface ripples, indicating a reef or a sudden darkening signaling an approaching squall. Winds, named for their directions like Boreas from the north or Zephyrus from the west, were memorized not as myths but as practical forces. The Etesian winds, blowing steadily each summer, were a boon for sailing south but a curse for return voyages, dictating seasonal trade schedules. Archaeological finds, like lead-sounding weights from shipwrecks near Rhodes, show how sailors measured water depth, dropping weighted lines to avoid grounding on unseen rocks. These tools, simple yet precise, reflect a pragmatic approach to taming Poseidon's realm, blending empirical skill with cautious respect for the divine. Maritime regulations extended beyond harbor dues to encompass the very design and operation of ships. In cities like Aegina, laws mandated regular hull inspections to prevent leaks, with fines for captains who sailed unseaworthy vessels. You can imagine the bustle of a shipyard, where craftsmen applied hot pitch to seams while overseers checked, or placements for balance. Crews were subject to strict hierarchies. The Kybernetes or helmsman held authority second only to the captain, his expertise in steering through narrow straits like the Hellespont critical to survival. Contracts, inscribed on clay tablets found in Corinthian archives, outlined wages and rations, typically a drachma per day for rowers, supplemented by figs or lentils. These agreements ensured discipline, as desertion at sea could doom an entire crew. The human toll of seafaring was evident in the lives of those who braved the waves. Families in coastal towns like Miletus often lost fathers or sons to storms, their names etched on modest gravestones noting their trade, Cleon, sailor, taken by Poseidon. Yet, maritime culture fostered resilience. Sailors' guilds, early precursors to unions, emerged in ports like Samos, pooling resources for communal offerings to Poseidon or mutual aid for widows. Rituals remained central. Before a voyage, crews poured wine into the sea, chanting hymns recorded in Homeric texts, seeking protection from sudden gales. Shipwrecks, like the one off Alonissos with its cargo of 3,000 amphorae, revealed the risks entire fortunes lost in a single night. As Greek trade expanded, contact with Phoenician and Egyptian sailors introduced new techniques, like triangular sails for better wind capture. But how did these foreign influences reshape Greek navigation? And what tensions arose when traditional periploy clashed with imported knowledge? As you ponder the horizon, one question looms: did Poseidon's currents ever yield their secrets, or did they guard them beneath the waves? As you stand at the helm of an archaic Greek vessel, the Aegean's restless waves whisper of Poseidon's enduring grip, a force that both sustained and tested the mariners of the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. The navigational charts and regulations that guided these sailors were not just tools for survival, but the scaffolding of Greece's economic and cultural expansion. By mastering the seas, Greeks connected distant shores, from the grain-rich Black Sea to the papyrus markets of Egypt, weaving a maritime network that shaped their world. Yet, this mastery came at a cost, and the culmination of their efforts reveals the resilience and fragility of those who sailed under Poseidon's watchful gaze. The Periplus, that humble catalogue of ports and hazards, evolved as Greek trade flourished. By the late 6th century BCE, these guides grew more detailed, incorporating knowledge from Phoenician traders whose own charts mapped the Mediterranean's western reaches. You can imagine a captain in Syracuse, a Greek colony in Sicily, comparing his periplus with the Phoenicians, noting new routes to Carthage or safer anchorages near Malta. Archaeological evidence, like clay tablets from Piraeus, shows harbour logs recording foreign ships, their cargoes taxed at rates set by local councils. This exchange wasn't always harmonious. Greek city-states like Corinth guarded their navigational secrets jealously, fearing competitors. Yet, the adoption of Phoenician lateen sails, triangular and more maneuverable, improved Greek ships, allowing them to tack against winds that once stranded them. A subtle but revolutionary shift in maritime technology. Regulations, too, adapted to the growing complexity of seafaring. In Athens, Solon's reforms around 594 BCE included maritime laws to protect merchants, mandating insurance-like agreements where investors shared losses from shipwrecks. You might see a scribe in the Agora inscribing a contract on a wax tablet, detailing shared risks for a voyage to Cyprus carrying amphorae of wine. These laws fostered trust, enabling small-scale traders like a potter from Rhodes exporting his wares to compete with wealthier merchants. Violations, however, were harshly punished. Inscriptions from Chios described confiscation of ships for smuggling, a crime that disrupted the delicate balance of trade. Harbors became microcosms of civic order, with officials monitoring everything, from ballast stones to crew drunkenness, ensuring Poseidon's chaos didn't spill ashore. The human stories behind these voyages were often overshadowed by their cargoes. Sailors, whose names rarely survive, left traces in votive offerings, small bronze anchors or dolphin figurines, dedicated at Poseidon's sanctuaries like the temple at Salion. These tokens, found in excavations, speak of gratitude for safe returns or pleas for lost comrades. Families in coastal villages maintained shrines, burning fine scented incense to honor those taken by the sea. A phrase etched on gravestones from Miletus to Thera. The rise of colonies, from Massalia in modern France to Cyrene in Libya, stretched these communities, with sailors forging new lives far from home, their Greek identity preserved through shared rituals and trade networks. Reflecting on this, the Greeks' maritime world feels strikingly modern systems of navigation, regulation, and community, not unlike today's global trade. Their periploi, though rudimentary, laid the groundwork for cartography, while their laws prefigured modern maritime codes. Yet, the sea remained untamed, a reminder of human limits. As shipwrecks piled up on Poseidon's ocean floor, one wonders, did the Greeks' meticulous charts and rules ever truly conquer the sea? Or did they merely learn to navigate its indifference? The answer lies in the waves, still carrying echoes of their quiet triumphs and losses. Athena's threads, weaving techniques and intellectual pursuits in Athenian homesses. You step into the sunlit courtyard of an Athenian home in the 5th century BCE. The rhythmic clack of a loom fills the air, a sound as familiar to these households as the chatter of the Agora. Athena, goddess of wisdom and crafts, presided over this domestic domain, where weaving was not just a chore but a vital thread in the fabric of Greek society. In this era, every household, from the modest dwellings of potters to the grand estates of aristocrats, relied on the skill of its women to produce textiles that clothed families, adorned homes, and fueled trade. You can almost feel the coarse wool under your fingers as you explore the intricate techniques and intellectual currents that flowed through these looms, weaving together practicality and philosophy in the heart of Athens. The loom itself, typically an upright wooden frame, was a fixture in the gynekon, the women's quarters. You might see a young girl, barely 10, learning from her mother to stretch warp threads long strands of wool, or linen tightly across the frame, weighted at the bottom with clay or stone weights shaped like teardrops. These weights, found in abundance during excavations in Attica, were often inscribed with simple marks, perhaps a maker's name or a prayer to Athena. The weft, a horizontal thread, was passed through the warp using a shuttle, a polished piece of bone or wood, creating patterns that ranged from simple stripes to complex geometric designs. Wool, sourced from local sheep grazing on Attic hills, was dyed with natural pigments, madder root for red, woad for blue, or saffron for a costly yellow. The process was laborious, requiring days to spin enough yarn for a single peplos, the traditional draped garment worn by women. Weaving was more than a craft. It was a social and economic cornerstone. In poorer homes, women wove for their families, producing blankets and tunics that lasted years. Wealthier households sold surplus textiles in the agora, where a finely woven himation could fetch several drachmas. Archaeological evidence from Keramakos reveals loom weights, alongside market scales, hinting at this cottage industry scale. Women's skill was celebrated in festivals like the Panathenea, where a massive peplos, embroidered with scenes of Athena's triumphs, was presented to her statue on the Acropolis. You can imagine the collective effort, dozens of women, from slaves to priestesses, working months to stitch this offering, their needles glinting in lamplight. Yet, Athena's domain extended beyond the loom to the mind. In these same homes, women engaged in intellectual pursuits, albeit quietly. While men debated in the agora, women discussed poetry or philosophy during weaving sessions, their conversations weaving ideas as intricate as their textiles. Sappho's verses, memorized by some, or stories of Penelope's cleverness in the Odyssey, inspired pride in their craft. In elite households, women like Aspasia, Pericles' companion, hosted intellectual gatherings, blending domesticity with discourse. Vase paintings from the period depict women reading scrolls or playing lyres, suggesting a literacy that, while limited, was not absent. This interplay of craft and intellect defined Athenian homes. But it wasn't without tension. As Athens grew, wealthier, imported textiles from Persia threatened local weavers, while philosophical schools began questioning women's roles. How did these women balance their traditional duties with the intellectual currents stirring their city? And what hidden influence did their threads wield in Athens' golden age? As you linger by the loom, one question persists. Did Athena's wisdom truly guide their hands? Or did their hands shape her legacy? As you linger in the cool shade of an Athenian courtyard, the steady hum of the loom weaves a backdrop to a world where Athena's influence bound craft to intellect. In the 5th century BCE, the women of Athens wove not just cloth, but the very social fabric of their city, their hands shaping textiles that carried economic and cultural weight. The loom was a stage for quiet resilience, where women of all classes, from slaves spinning coarse wool to aristocrats embroidering fine linen, contributed to a household economy that underpinned Athens' golden age. Yet, within these repetitive tasks, you sense a deeper current, the intellectual life that flourished in the gynekon, where ideas were spun as deftly as threads, often unnoticed by the male-dominated agora. The weaving process itself was a study in patience and precision. You might watch a woman carding wool, combing out tangles with tools made from sharpened reeds, before spinning it into yarn using a drop spindle as simple stick-weighted, with a clay whirl, thousands of which have been unearthed in Athenian homes. The yarn, often dyed in vats of boiled madder or indigo imported from Phoenicia, required careful preparation. A single misstep could ruin a batch, wasting weeks of labor. Patterns grew more intricate over time, with techniques like tapestry, weaving allowing for detailed scenes of Athena's owl or a victorious hoplite worked into cloaks. For festivals, these skills were passed down through generations, mothers teaching daughters in the same courtyards where they learned, their hands moving in rhythms older than the Parthenon itself. Economically, weaving was a lifeline. In poorer households, women wove to clothe their families, mending tunics until they were threadbare. Surplus cloth, often bartered in local markets, brought in small but vital income, perhaps enough for a jug of oil or a child's sandals. Wealthier, women oversaw. Slaves who produced textiles for trade, their workshops humming with activity. Excavations in Olympus reveal homes with dedicated weaving rooms, their floors littered with loom weights and spindle whirls, suggesting small-scale industries. The Panathenaea's ceremonial peplos, woven by a team of women chosen for their skill, was a public testament to this craft, its presentation a civic event rivaling athletic contests. You can almost see the procession, the peplos draped over a ship-like cart, its folds catching the sunlight as crowds cheered Athena's glory. Intellectually, the Gynekon was a hidden forum. Women, barred from formal schools, shared knowledge, orally while weaving, reciting epic poetry or debating myths like Arachne's challenge to Athena. Some, particularly in elite circles engaged with philosophical ideas, Aspasia, for instance, was said to have influenced Socrates' circle, her Homer salon for discourse. Vase paintings show women with scrolls, hinting at literacy among the wealthy, while inscriptions on loom weights bear names like Calliope or Irene, suggesting personal pride in their work. These moments of intellectual exchange, though rarely recorded, shaped the cultural undercurrents of Athens, where women's voices carried weight in private spheres. But as Athens' wealth grew, so did external pressures. Persian and Egyptian textiles, finer and cheaper, flooded markets, challenging local weavers. Meanwhile, philosophers like Plato questioned traditional roles, arguing for equality in education while others reinforced women's domestic confinement. How did these women navigate the clash between their indispensable craft and a city increasingly open to foreign goods and ideas as the loom's rhythm fades? One question lingers: did their threads hold Athens together, or were they fraying under the weight of change? As you stand in the quiet Gynekon of an Athenian home, the loom's steady rhythm fades, yet its echoes linger, weaving together the threads of craft and intellect that defined women's lives in 5th century BCE. Athens, the work of these women spinning, dyeing, and weaving was not merely domestic drudgery, but a cornerstone of Athenian society, sustaining families and fueling trade while fostering a subtle intellectual culture. The culmination of their efforts reveals a delicate balance, a world where Athena's wisdom guided both the practical and the philosophical. Even as external forces threaten to unravel their contributions, you can almost feel the weight of a finished peplos, its folds heavy with labor and meaning. As you consider how these threads shaped Athens' golden age, the economic impact of weaving was undeniable. By the late 5th century BCE, Athens' markets bustled with textiles, from coarse cloaks worn by farmers to fine chittons coveted by the elite. Women's workshops, often staffed by slaves or freed women, produced goods that competed with imports from Miletus, renowned for its purple-dyed wool. Excavations at sites like Phorikos uncovered dyeing vats and loom weights, evidence of small-scale industries that employed entire households. The Panathenaea's peplos, a communal masterpiece, symbolized this collective effort. Its intricate embroidery depicting Athena's battle with giants requiring months of collaboration. You might imagine the pride of a weaver, her calloused fingers tracing the goddess's image, knowing her work would drape the Acropolis' sacred statue. Intellectually, the Gynekon remained a crucible for ideas. Despite women's exclusion from formal education, as they wove, women shared stories from Homeric epics to local gossip, creating an oral tradition that preserved cultural knowledge. In wealthier homes, figures like Aspasia hosted symposia where philosophy mingled with domesticity, challenging the notion that women's minds were confined to the loom. Archaeological finds, such as terracotta figurines of women reading or playing lyres, suggest a quiet literacy among some, while inscriptions on grave stelae honor weavers like Phaedra, skilled in cloth, hinting at their societal value. These women, though rarely named in history, shaped Athens' intellectual undercurrents, their conversations threading ideas into the city's cultural fabric. Yet, the balance tipped as Athens faced economic and social shifts. The Peloponnesian War for 31 to 400 for BCE strained resources, increasing demand for textiles to clothe soldiers while disrupting trade routes for imported dyes. Persian and Egyptian fabrics, cheaper and more vibrant, flooded markets, undercutting local weavers. Philosophical debates, meanwhile, cast a double-edged shadow. Plato's Republic envisioned women in education, yet traditionalists like Xenophon argued for their domestic confinement. This tension left weavers caught between pride in their craft and the threat of obsolescence. Some adapted, incorporating foreign patterns into their work. Vases from the period show Greek women weaving Persian-style florals, while others clung to traditional methods. Their looms a quiet act of resistance. Reflecting on this, Athena's threads reveal a timeless truth. The mundane tasks of ordinary people, like weaving, can anchor a civilization. These women, often invisible in grand histories, wove not just cloth but the resilience of Athens. Their intellectual exchanges as vital as their textiles. Today, we see parallels in overlooked labor craftspeople, caregivers whose quiet work sustains society. But as Athens' looms fell silent, replaced by imports and war's demands, one question remains. Did these women's threads ultimately preserve their city's spirit? Or were they lost in the fray of progress? The answer lies in the enduring patterns they left behind, etched in clay and memory. Apollo's harmonies, musical instruments and medical routines in Hellenic temple sauce. You step into the sun-warmed precinct of a Hellenic temple dedicated to Apollo, god of music and healing. The faint strains of a lyre drift through the air, mingling with the scent of burning laurel. In the 5th century BCE, temples like those at Delphi or Delos were not just sacred spaces, but vibrant centers of daily life, where music and medicine intertwined in rituals that shaped Greek culture. Apollo's dual domains governed the rhythms of both body and soul, and his priests musicians, and healers worked tirelessly to maintain harmony in their communities. You can almost feel the smooth wood of a kithara under your fingers as you explore the meticulous routines of these temples, where ordinary tasks tuning strings, mixing herbs carried divine significance. The musical life of Apollo's sanctuaries was rooted in precision and tradition. You might see a musician clad in a simple chiton, adjusting the gut strings of a lyre, a 7-stringed instrument crafted from tortoise shell and cowhide. The kithara, its larger cousin, was favored for public performances, its resonant tones filling temple courtyards during festivals like the Pythian Games. These instruments, found in fragments at sites like Athens' Agora, were tuned using oral scales passed down through generations. Their notes aligned with mathematical ratios Pythagoras would later formalize. Musicians, often trained from childhood, practiced daily, their calloused fingers coaxing melodies that honored Apollo or soothed worshippers. These performances weren't mere entertainment, they were offerings believed to align the cosmos, as evidenced by inscriptions dedicating songs to the god. Medical routines were equally central. Apollo, as healer, inspired temple practices that blended empirical knowledge with ritual. You can imagine a priest-physician in a white robe, grinding herbs in a mortar fennel for digestion, myrrh for wounds sourced from local hills or traded from Egypt. Temples like the Asclepieion at Epidaurus served as early hospitals, where patients sought cures through incubation, sleeping in sacred halls to receive dream visions from Apollo or his son Asclepius. Archaeological records show stone tablets listing treatments, barley water for fevers, honey poultices for infections. These remedies, though simple, were administered with care, recorded on clay tablets to track patient progress. The sick offered terracotta models of healed limbs, feet, hands, even eyes, found in abundance at Corinthian sanctuaries as thanks for divine intervention. These routines were communal efforts. Musicians collaborated with poets to compose hymns, their words etched on stone at Delphi, while healers worked alongside attendants who cleaned altars or prepared ritual baths. Women, though rarely priests, played roles as midwives or herbalists, their knowledge vital to temple medicine. Festivals saw entire communities gather, their voices rising in choral songs to Apollo, accompanied by Orlo's pipes whose reedy tones echoed across hills. These events, described in Pindar's odes, reinforced social bonds, with music and healing uniting rich and poor in shared devotion. Yet, the balance between music and medicine was delicate. As Greek cities grew, temples faced increasing demand for cures, while musical performances became competitive, with rival kitharists vying for prestige. How did Apollo's priests maintain harmony between these sacred duties and the pressures of a changing society? As you listen to the lyre's fading notes, one question lingers: did Apollo's harmonies truly heal both body and soul, or were they stretched thin by the weight of human need? As you linger in the marble-lined precinct of an Apollonian temple, the soft twang of a lyre blends with the murmur of supplicants seeking healing, a testament to Apollo's dual role as patron of music and medicine in 5th century BCE Greece. The temple, whether at Delphi's sacred slopes or Delos' windswept shores, was a hub of meticulous routines, where priests and attendants wove together sound and remedy to serve both gods and mortals. You can almost smell the crushed herbs and hear the rhythmic chants, as the daily work of tuning instruments and tending the sick reveals a society striving for harmony. Amid the chaos of life, these tasks, though repetitive, were the heartbeat of Greek communal worship. Binding the divine to the everyday. Musical practice in Apollo's temples was a disciplined craft. You might observe a kitharist, his fingers deftly adjusting the tension of sheep-gut strings on a box lyre, preparing for a hymn to be sung at dusk. These instruments, crafted by artisans using olive wood and bronze fittings, were maintained with care, as a mistuned note was thought to disrupt divine favor. Musicians memorized complex scales, their intervals rooted in mathematical precision later codified by Pythagorean theories. Inscriptions from Delphi record payments to all-time players of the double-reed aulos, who accompanied choral performances, their haunting melodies guiding worshippers into a trance-like reverence. These musicians, often freedmen men trained in temple schools, competed fiercely during festivals, their victories etched on stone stelae. Much like athletic triumphs, a single performance could elevate a family's status, yet required hours of unnoticed rehearsal in the temple's quiet corners. Medical routines were equally rigorous. You can envision a healer mixing salves in a bronze bowl, combining willow bark for pain or chamomile for calm, based on recipes preserved in oral tradition. Temples like the Asclepieian at Kos kept detailed records, with clay tablets listing patients' symptoms and treatments, diets of lentils for digestion, or vapor baths for respiratory ailments. The practice of incubation was central. Patients slept on stone benches in sacred chambers, hoping for Apollo's guidance in dreams. Excavations reveal offerings of terracotta ears or legs, left by those cured of deafness or lameness, suggesting a blend of faith and practical care. Healers, often priests trained in both ritual and herbalism, worked alongside midwives and attendants, their knowledge drawn from observation and trade with regions like Lydia, where myrrh and frankincense enhanced remedies. This interplay of music and medicine fostered community. Festivals like the Thegelius or Apollo's hymns paired with purification rites, where music cleansed the soul as herbs cleansed the body. You might see villagers, from potters to landowners, joining choruses, their voices unified in devotion. Women, though rarely formal healers, contributed as herbalists, their expertise in plants like hellebore vital to temple pharmacies. Yet, as Greek cities expanded, temples faced strain. The Peloponnesian War brought waves of sick and wounded, overwhelming healers, while musical contests grew lavish, diverting resources. Foreign influences, like Egyptian surgical tools, began reshaping medical practices, challenging traditional methods. How did Apollo's servants balance these growing demands with their sacred duties? The lyre's notes and the healer's mortar worked in unison, but could they withstand the pressures of war and cultural change? As you ponder the temple's fading harmonies, one question remains: did Apollo's dual gifts truly unify the Greek spirit, or were they stretched to breaking by the weight of mortal need? As you stand within the sacred precinct of an Apollonian temple, the fading notes of an orlos linger, intertwined with the faint scent of healing herbs, a final testament to Apollo's dual dominion over music and medicine in 5th century BCE Greece. These temples, from the oracle-haunted slopes of Delphi to the serene halls of Epidaurus, were more than sanctuaries. They were lifelines for communities seeking balance in body and soul. The culmination of their daily routines, musicians tuning, lyres, healers mixing salves reveals a delicate harmony that sustained Greek society through faith and practice. Yet, as the world beyond the temple walls shifted, these routines faced challenges that tested Apollo's enduring gifts. The musical traditions of Apollo's temples reached their peak during festivals, where entire city-states gathered to honor the god. You can imagine the Pythian games where Cytherists and Orlotai competed before thousands, their melodies judged not just for beauty, but for their ability to invoke divine order. Victorious musicians, their names carved on marble at Delphi, gained modest fame, their performances immortalized in Pindar's odes. These events, funded by temple treasuries, required meticulous organization, scheduling rehearsals, maintaining instruments, and training choruses of local youths. Excavations revealed bronze tuning pegs and reed fragments, evidence of the care taken to ensure each note resonated perfectly, aligning human effort with cosmic harmony. Music was believed to soothe ailments, with healers sometimes prescribing lyre recitals alongside herbal remedies, a practice echoed in later Hippocratic texts. Medical routines, meanwhile, grew increasingly sophisticated. The Asclepieian at Kos, a hub of healing, recorded treatments on stone tablets, poultices of fig paste for sores, or infusions of mint for fever. Incubation remained central, with patients dreaming of Apollo's guidance, their visions interpreted by priests trained in both medicine and divination. Archaeological finds, like votive offerings of terracotta hearts or lungs, show gratitude for cures, while inscriptions list donations, barley, oil, or coins to sustain temple operations. Healers adapted foreign techniques, such as Egyptian methods for setting bones, blending them with local knowledge. Women, though rarely formal physicians, were integral as midwives and herbalists. Their expertise in plants like silphium, and now extinct, cure-all, vital to temple pharmacies. The Peloponnesian War for 31 to 400 for BCE strained this harmony. Temples became overcrowded with wounded soldiers and plague victims, pushing healers beyond their limits. Resources dwindled as trade routes faltered, making exotic herbs like myrrh scarce. Musical festivals, once unifying, grew competitive, with wealthier cities like Athens outspending smaller ones, turning Apollo's hymns into displays of civic pride. Philosophical shifts, led by figures like Socrates, questioned traditional rituals, suggesting health and harmony came from reason, not divine intervention. Yet, temple routines persisted, their resilience rooted in community. You might see a farmer's wife offering a clay foot to Apollo, thanking him for her son's recovery, or a chorus of children singing to calm a crowded sanctuary. Reflecting on this, Apollo's harmonies reveal a timeless truth. The ordinary acts of tuning strings and mixing herbs held Greek society together, blending faith with practicality. Today, we see echoes in communal rituals, music therapy, holistic medicine that seek balance in chaos. But as war and philosophy reshaped Greece, one question endures: did Apollo's gifts of music and healing truly unify a fracturing world, or did they merely soothe its wounds? The answer lies in the quiet offerings left at his altars, enduring symbols of human hope. Artemis' wilderness, hunting protocols, and sacred groves in Greek countrysides. You wander through the rugged hills of the Greek countryside in the 5th century BCE. The rustle of leaves and distant call of a stag evoke the presence of Artemis, goddess of the hunt and protector of wild spaces. In this era, the wilderness was not just a backdrop, but a vital part of Greek life, where hunting and sacred groves were governed by meticulous protocols and rituals. These practices, rooted in survival and reverence, shaped rural communities. From Arcadia's forested slopes to Attica's olive-dotted plains, you can almost feel the weight of a bough in your hands as you explore the daily routines of hunters and the sanctity of Artemis' groves, where every step was a balance between human need and divine respect. Hunting in ancient Greece was both a necessity and a ritual, regulated by unwritten codes that honored Artemis. You might see a group of young men, their tunics stained with earth, setting out at dawn with spears and nets crafted from flax. Their prey deer, hares, or wild boars provided meat for festivals and hides for clothing. But the hunt was never reckless. Hunters offered prayers to Artemis, burning thyme or laurel on small altars before setting out, a practice recorded in Xenophon's hunting with dogs. Often Laconian hounds bred for their keen noses were trained to track scents, their barks echoing through oak groves. Archaeological finds, like bronze arrowheads from Peloponnesian sites, showed the precision of their tools, designed for clean kills to avoid angering the goddess. Sacred groves, dedicated to Artemis, were scattered across the landscape, their boundaries marked by stone pillars or simple fences. These spaces, like the grove at Broron near Athens, were untouched by axes, their trees cypress, pine, or myrtle considered Artemis' own. You can imagine young girls, known as little bears, performing rituals at Broron, dancing in saffron robes to honor the goddess during the Arctia festival. These groves were not just spiritual but ecological sanctuaries, preserving wildlife and water sources. Inscriptions from Ephesus detail fines for cutting trees or poaching in these areas, reflecting strict community oversight. Villagers dependent on nearby forests for firewood and game respected these boundaries, fearing Artemis' wrath. Believed to manifest as failed hunts or barren fields, the human element of this world was one of resilience. Rural families, often farmers or herders, supplemented their diets through hunting, with men and boys learning the craft from elders. Women, though rarely hunters, gathered herbs like wild mint or fennel in the groves, their knowledge vital for household remedies. These communities lived by seasonal rhythms, hunting in autumn when game was plentiful, and avoiding spring to protect breeding animals, a practical conservation rooted in reverence. Votive offerings, such as clay figurines of stags or bows, found at Artemis' sanctuaries, show gratitude for successful hunts or pleas for her favor. Yet, the balance between human survival and divine sanctity was fragile. As Greek populations grew, pressure on wild lands increased. With farmers clearing forests for fields, urban centers like Athens demanded more resources, straining rural traditions. How did these communities maintain Artemis' protocols amid encroaching change, and what role did her groves play in preserving their way of life? As you tread softly through the wilderness, one question lingers: did Artemis' sacred spaces shield the countryside from human greed? Or were they destined to fade under its weight? As you tread deeper into the wilds of 5th century BCE Greece, the scent of pine and the distant bark of a hound draw you closer to Artemis' domain, where the countryside pulsed with the rhythms of hunting and reverence for sacred groves. These landscapes, from the craggy hills of Arcadia to the lush valleys of Boeotia, were not merely resources but sacred spaces, governed by protocols that balanced human survival with divine mandate. You can almost hear the soft chants of hunters invoking Artemis' favor, their voices blending with the rustle of leaves in her groves. The daily routines of rural Greeks tracking game, tending shrines, and honoring the goddess reveal a world where every action was a delicate negotiation with the wild. Hunting was a disciplined craft, steeped in ritual and strategy. You might observe a group of hunters, their bronze-tipped spears gleaming, moving silently through a forest at dawn. They followed strict codes, as Xenophon notes in his Synergeticus, sparing young or pregnant animals to ensure future hunts are practiced. Rooted in both pragmatism and respect for Artemis, nets woven from flax and hemp were set with precision to trap hares or deer, while Laconian and Molossian hounds, prized for their speed, flushed out game. Archaeological finds from rural sanctuaries, like arrowheads and bone whistles used to signal dogs, show the care taken in these pursuits. Hunters trained for years, learning to read tracks or predict boar movements. Their knowledge passed down through stories told around village fires. Artemis' sacred groves were the heart of this world, serving as both ecological and spiritual havens. You can envision a grove near Orchomenos, its ancient oaks untouched, their roots curling around springs sacred to the goddess. These spaces, marked by simple altars or stone herms, were maintained by local communities who swept away fallen leaves and repaired boundary markers. Inscriptions from Miletus detail communal laws. Poaching in a grove could lead to fines or public shaming, while offerings, clay stacks or woven garlands were left to appease Artemis. The Arctea festival at Breuron saw girls as young as 7 perform dances mimicking bears, a ritual tied to myths of Artemis' protective wrath, as recorded in Aristophanes' works. These groves also preserve biodiversity with deer and birds, thriving under the goddess's aegis, a balance rural Greeks understood as vital to their survival. The people of the countryside lived in harmony with these practices. Men hunted to supplement sparse harvests, while women gathered wild herbs, thyme for incense, oregano for salves within grove boundaries, respecting their sanctity. Families offered small tokens like terracotta boughs or antlers, found in excavations at Artemis' sanctuaries in Euboea, to ensure bountiful hunts. These communities, often isolated from urban centers like Athens, maintained their traditions through oral tales of Artemis' vengeance, such as the myth of Actaeon, torn apart for violating her domain. Yet, this harmony faced growing threats. The Peloponnesian War for 314 BC drove refugees into rural areas, increasing pressure on game and forests. Urban demand for timber and farmland led to grove encroachments, despite laws protecting them. How did rural Greeks uphold Artemis' protocols as their world shifted? And what did these sacred spaces mean to a people caught between tradition and necessity? As you pause by a grove's edge, one question persists. Could Artemis' wilderness endure the encroaching tide of human ambition, or was it fated to shrink under its weight? As you stand at the edge of a sacred grove, the whispers of Artemis' wilderness surround you, her presence felt in the rustling cypress and the fleeting shadow of a deer. In 5th century BCE Greece, the countryside's hunting protocols and sacred groves were not just traditions but lifelines, anchoring rural communities to both survival and spirituality. The culmination of these practices, hunters tracking game with reverence, villagers tending groves with care, reveals a delicate balance that sustained the Greek hinterlands. Yet, as the world beyond these wild spaces shifted, the resilience of Artemis' domain was tested, her sacred boundaries strained by human need and ambition. Hunting reached its peak in autumn when villages prepared for winter feasts and festivals. You might see hunters returning with a boar, its hide destined for leather, its meat shared in communal meals honoring Artemis. These hunts, guided by Xenophon's principles, were strategic. Hunters used decoys like carved wooden birds to lure prey and spared young animals to ensure future bounty. Excavations in Arcadia uncover bronze spearheads and net weights, evidence of tools honed for efficiency and respect. Successful hunts were celebrated with offerings, antlers or clay figurines, left at small altars as seen in sanctuaries like Artemis' Orthia in Sparta. These acts reinforced community bonds, with families gathering to roast game under starlit skies, their stories of Artemis' favor echoing through oral traditions. Sacred groves, meanwhile, stood as enduring symbols of divine protection. At Breuron, the Arctea festival culminated in rituals where girls danced as bears, their movements mimicking the goddess's wild grace, as described in Aristophanes' Lysistrata. These groves, with their untouched oaks and clear springs, were ecological havens, preserving wildlife amid growing human encroachment. Inscriptions from Ephesus show communities fining violators who cut trees or hunted illegally, with penalties funding grove maintenance. Women played a vital role, gathering herbs like wild sage for rituals and remedies, their knowledge passed down through generations. Votive tablets, etched with prayers for fertile fields or safe childbirth, found in Thessalian groves, reveal the deep trust placed in Artemis' protection. The Peloponnesian War for 31 to 400 for BCE disrupted this balance. Refugees fleeing urban conflicts strained rural resources, leading to overhunting and illegal logging in sacred groves. Athens' demand for timber to rebuild its navy clashed with Artemis' sanctity, as farmers cleared land to feed growing populations. Philosophical shifts like those of the Sophists began questioning divine retribution. weakening traditional respect for groves. Yet, rural communities adapted, reinforcing laws and rituals to protect their sacred spaces. Some groves, like those in Euboea, became refuges for displaced villagers, their altars crowded with offerings of clay hares and woven reeds, symbols of defiance against chaos. Reflecting on this, Artemis' wilderness reveals a timeless truth. The interplay of human survival and reverence for nature can sustain communities through crisis. Today, we see echoes in conservation efforts, where protected lands balance human needs with ecological sanctity. The Greeks' hunting codes and grove protections prefigured modern environmental ethics, rooted in respect for the wild. But as war and progress pressed against Artemis' domain, one question endures: did her sacred groves preserve the soul of rural Greece, or were they merely fleeting sanctuaries in a world bending to human will? The answer lies in the quiet altars, still standing amid the trees, whispering of a goddess who guarded the wild heart of her people. Hermes' pathways, courier cisterns and commercial exchanges across Greek city-statesis. You traverse the dusty roads connecting the city-states of 5th century BCE Greece. The swift footfalls of a runner echo in the distance, a reminder of Hermes, god of travel, trade, and messengers. In this era, the pathways linking Athens to Corinth or Thebes to Delphi were not just routes for goods, but arteries of communication, pulsing with the efforts of couriers and merchants who sustained the Greek world. These systems, grounded in meticulous organization and practical ingenuity, turned scattered palaces into a network of exchange, where ideas, goods, and news flowed as freely as Hermes' winged sandals. You can almost feel the weight of a clay tablet in your hands as you explore the daily routines of these couriers and the commerce they enabled, weaving Greece's economic and social fabric. Couriers, known as hemerodromoi, were the backbone of this system. You might see a young man, lean and sun-browned, sprinting along a dirt path, a wax tablet or sealed scroll tucked under his arm. These runners, often trained from youth, could cover 50 miles a day, relaying messages between city-states. Herodotus recounts the legendary run of Pheidippides from Athens to Sparta, a 150-mile journey completed in under 2 days to summon aid before Marathon. Their routes followed well-trodden paths, marked by stone-homed square pillars topped with Hermes' head erected at crossroads and sanctuaries. Archaeological finds, like these homes in Attica, show offerings of oil or figs left by travelers seeking safe passage. Couriers memorized routes, navigating by landmarks like Mount Parnassus or the Isthmus of Corinth, their knowledge vital in an age without maps. Commercial exchanges thrived alongside these pathways. You can envision merchants in the Agora of Samos haggling over amphorae of olive oil or bundles of dyed wool, their transactions recorded on clay tablets. Trade was regulated by city-state laws. Athens imposed a 2% tax on imports, collected by officials at Piraeus, while Corinth's market inspectors ensured fair weights, using standardized bronze measures found in excavations. Goods traveled by mule or cart along stone-paved roads like the sacred way to Delphi, their passage eased by Hermes' protection. Markets buzzed with local and foreign wares, Egyptian papyrus, Phoenician glass, or Thracian silver carried by traders who doubled as couriers, sharing news with their goods. Inscriptions from Miletus detail contracts specifying delivery times with penalties for delays, reflecting a system as structured as any modern logistics network. The human element was one of endurance. Couriers, often lower-class men or freed. Slaves faced bandits and weather. Their only pay a few drachmas and a meal of barley bread. Merchants, too, bore risks, their fortunes tied to fragile cargoes. Yet, both groups fostered connection, carrying tales of distant cities or decrees from oracles. Temples to Hermes, like those at Tanagra, were filled with votive sandals or miniature. Carts, tokens of gratitude for safe deliveries. Women, though rarely couriers, managed market stalls, their ledgers balancing household budgets with trade profits. As Greece's trade networks expanded, so did their complexity, with Persian and Egyptian influences introducing new goods and accounting methods. How did these changes challenge the traditional pathways of Hermes' couriers? And what did it mean for the humble runners who tied Greece together? As you pause by a weathered herm, one question lingers. Did Hermes' swift messengers truly unify the fractured city-states, or were their efforts strained by the growing demands of commerce? As you follow the winding paths of 5th century BCE Greece, the clatter of a merchant's cart and the faint patter of a courier's footsteps evoke Hermes' restless spirit, guiding the flow of goods and messages across the city-states. These pathways, from the stone-paved sacred way to Delphi to the dusty trails linking Corinth and Thebes, were the lifelines of Greek commerce and communication. The couriers and traders who traversed them operated within a meticulously organized system, balancing speed, reliability, and divine favor. You can almost smell the olive oil in sealed amphorae as you delve into the daily grind of these runners and merchants, whose efforts wove Greece's scattered palace into a vibrant network of exchange. The hemerodromoi, or day runners, were more than messengers. They were vital links in a fragmented world. You might see a courier, his tunic damp with sweat, pausing at a roadside shrine to Hermes to offer a quick prayer, perhaps leaving a pebble or a fig as thanks for safe passage. These runners memorized routes with precision, navigating by natural landmarks, a gnarled olive tree or a river bend, since written maps were rare. Their training, as described by Xenophon, included endurance runs and diet regimens of barley porridge and dried fish to sustain their stamina. Archaeological finds, like clay tablets from Athens' Agora, record payments to couriers, often a drachma per delivery, a modest sum for grueling work. Some carried official decrees, like Athens' call for allies, while others bore private letters, sealed with wax to ensure confidentiality. Commerce thrived on the same paths, driven by merchants who doubled as informal couriers. You can envision a trader leading a mule laden with pottery from Corinth, bound for the markets of Aegina. These merchants operated under strict regulations. City-states like Miletus required licenses for market stalls, with fines for selling substandard goods as evidenced by inscriptions on stone. Standardized weights, often bronze or lead, ensured fair trade. Excavations in Piraeus reveal scales calibrated to the Attic standard, about 4.3 grams per drachma. Goods varied widely: Spartan iron tools, Chian wine, or Egyptian linen each. Transaction recorded on clay or wooden tablets, some specifying delivery deadlines to avoid penalties. Temples to Hermes, like those in Samos, served as banking hubs, where merchants deposited silver for safekeeping. Their trust in the god as practical as it was pious, the human toll was significant. Couriers faced dangers: bandits, wolves, or sudden storms, yet pressed on, their routes marked by herms etched with prayers. Merchants risked bankruptcy if cargoes were lost, as shipwrecks off Theseus attest. Their sunken amphorae a testament to Hermes' unpredictable favor. Communities supported these travelers. Villages offered water and bread to couriers, while women in market towns wove nets or repaired carts, their labor essential to trade. Votive offerings, like miniature wheels or sandals found in Boeotian shrines, showed gratitude for successful journeys, binding communities to Hermes' protection. As Greek trade expanded, foreign influences reshaped these systems. Persian accounting methods, using clay tokens for tallies, improved record keeping, while Phoenician traders introduced faster ships, challenging land-based couriers. These changes brought wealth, but also tension as city-states competed for dominance. How did Hermes' couriers and merchants adapt to this evolving world? And what did it mean for the fragile unity of the Palaeus? As you trace a Hermes' weathered outline, one question persists: could Hermes' pathways keep Greece connected, or were they fraying under the strain of ambition and rivalry? As you pause beside a weathered herm marking a dusty Greek crossroad, the faint echo of a courier's footsteps and a creak of a merchant's cart linger, evoking Hermes' tireless oversight of travel and trade in 5th century BCE Greece. The pathways connecting city-states like Athens, Corinth, and Delphi were more than routes. They were the sinews of a civilization, carrying messages and goods that bound fractured Palaeus into a fragile network. The culmination of these courier systems and commercial exchanges reveals a world of resilience, where humble runners and traders sustained Greece's economic and cultural life. Yet, as external pressures mounted, Hermes' pathways faced strains that tested their endurance. The hemerodromoi reached their peak during crises, like the Persian Wars. When swift communication was vital, you can imagine a runner, his lungs burning, delivering news of Marathon's victory to Athens' agora, his message sparking celebrations. These couriers, often unsung, were honored in small ways. Clay tablets from Thebes record bonuses of wine or oil for urgent deliveries. Their routes, marked by Hermes, became sacred, with communities maintaining shrines to Hermes, as seen in excavations at Sicyon, where votive sandals and miniature carts piled high. The system's efficiency relied on relays, with runners passing messages at way stations, simple huts stocked with water and bread, ensuring news traveled faster than any cart. This network, described by Herodotus, prefigured modern postal systems, its reliability a testament to Greek ingenuity. Commerce, meanwhile, flourished through meticulous organization. Markets in cities like Aegina buzzed with traders bartering Lydian electrum coins for Attic pottery or Sicilian grain. Inscriptions from Athens' Piraeus show detailed ledgers, with taxes funding road repairs and harbor docks. Merchants formed guilds, pooling resources to cover losses from banditry or storms, as evidenced by contracts on lead tablets from Corinth. Women, often managing stalls while men traveled, balanced accounts with clay tokens, their role crucial, yet rarely recorded. Temples to Hermes, like those in Phocis, doubled as safe deposit vaults, their priests overseeing silver deposits, blending faith with finance. Shipwrecks off Lesbos, laden with amphorae, revealed the risks traders faced, yet their persistence drove Greece's wealth. The Peloponnesian War for 31 to 400 for BCE tested these systems. War disrupted trade routes, with blockades cutting off grain supplies, while couriers risked capture to deliver military orders. Foreign influences, like Persian accounting ledgers and Phoenician maritime networks, introduced efficiencies but sparked tensions. Athens' adoption of coinage clashed with traditional bartering in smaller palaes, as seen in market disputes, recorded at Miletus. Yet, communities adapted, with couriers using coastal ships to bypass dangerous roads and merchants embracing foreign weights to standardize trade. Votive offerings, bronze herms and clay wheels piled up at sanctuaries, reflecting gratitude for Hermes' protection amid chaos. Reflecting on this, Hermes' pathways reveal a timeless truth. The quiet labor of couriers and merchants, like modern delivery workers or small businesses, binds societies together. Their networks laid the foundation for global trade, their Hermes' early markers of connectivity. But as war and foreign influences reshaped Greece, one question endures: did Hermes' pathways truly unify the city-states, or were they stretched thin by rivalry and greed? The answer lies in the faded Hermes and sunken cargoes, silent witnesses to a world held together by the swift steps of its messengers and the stubborn hope of its traders. Demeter's cycles, grain storage methods, and mystery cult initiations in Atticus. You settle into the quiet rhythms of the ancient world. Imagine yourself walking the fertile plains of Attica, where the soil of Greece cradled one of humanity's earliest experiments in organized agriculture. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, loomed large in the minds of those who tilled the earth here. Her story intertwined with the very cycles of life and death that governed the land. In the myths passed down through generations, Demeter was not just a divine figure, but a symbol of the earth's bounty and its unforgiving withholdings. Her tale began with abundance, as she wandered the fields, ensuring that grain swelled in the sun and roots delved deep into the nourishing soil. But it was a grief over the abduction of her daughter Persephone by Hades that introduced the stark reality of seasonal scarcity and narrative that mirrored the historical challenges faced by Attican farmers. In the real landscapes of ancient Attica, around the 8th century BCE, agriculture was the backbone of survival, and grain storage methods were the unsung heroes that bridged the gap between harvests. Wheat and barley dominated the fields, grown in rotation to preserve soil fertility, a practice Demeter herself might have approved of in her mythical oversight. Farmers in places like Eleusis and Athens relied on pithoi, large earthenware, jars buried partially in the ground to maintain cool temperatures and deter pests. These vessels, often sealed with clay lids and resin, could hold up to several hundred liters of grain, their thick walls insulating against moisture that might otherwise lead to spoilage. Archaeological digs have uncovered clusters of these Pythoian farmsteads, suggesting communal storage systems where families pooled resources to guard against famine. The process of storage was meticulous, a blend of practical ingenuity and ritualistic care. After threshing on open floors using oxen or wooden sledges studded with stones, the grain was winnowed by tossing it into the wind to separate chaff from seed. Then came the drying phase, spread out under the sun or in shaded areas to reduce humidity levels below 14%, preventing mold and insect infestation. Weevils and mice were constant threats, so farmers employed natural repellents like bay leaves or even cats, domesticated guardians echoing the protective instincts of Demeter's own watchful eye. In larger estates, underground silos lined with plaster or stone were excavated, some reaching depths of several meters, accessible via narrow openings that minimized exposure to air and light. These methods evolved from earlier Bronze Age techniques, refined during the Archaic period as populations grew and trade routes expanded, allowing Attica to export surplus to less fertile regions. Yet, beneath this pragmatic layer lay a deeper reverence, where Demeter's influence extended beyond the fields into the spiritual realm. The goddess's cycles of fertility and dormancy were not mere stories. They informed the timing of planting and harvesting, with festivals like the Theseus dedicated to her, where women enacted rituals of sowing and storing to invoke her favor. Historical records from inscriptions and vase paintings depict these events, showing how communities in Attica synchronized their agricultural calendars with lunar phases, believing Demeter's moods dictated the weather's whims. But what if this reverence hid secrets, initiations into mysteries that promised not just bountiful harvests, but eternal insights into life's renewal? As the grain settled into its silent repose within those buried jars, one wonders about the hidden rites that bound the living to the underworld's grasp. Continuing from the fertile plains of Attica, where Demeter's mythical sorrow shaped the seasons, you find yourself delving deeper into the shadowed world of mystery cults that arose in her honor. The Eleusinian mysteries, centered in the sanctuary at Eleusis, were not flamboyant spectacles but quiet, profound initiations that wove agriculture's practicalities with spiritual enlightenment. By the 6th century BCE, these rites had become a cornerstone of Attican society, drawing pilgrims from across Greece who sought solace in Demeter's promise of rebirth. Amid the cycles of loss and renewal, the cult's origins traced back to the Homeric hymn to Demeter, which recounted how the goddess, in her search for Persephone, taught the people of Eleusis the arts of cultivation and the secrets of the afterlife. Initiation into the mysteries was a structured process divided into stages that emphasized preparation and secrecy. Prospective initiates, known as mysti, underwent a period of purification, abstaining from certain foods like pomegranates symbolic of Persephone's entrapment, and engaging in ritual baths in the nearby sea. This mirrored the agricultural cycle. Just as grain was cleansed and stored, so too were human souls readied for deeper truths. The greater mysteries, held annually in the month of Bodromion around September, began with a procession from Athens to Eleusis, a 20-kilometer journey along the sacred way. Participants carried sacred objects in baskets, chanting hymns that invoked Demeter's blessings on the harvest. Historical accounts from figures like Plutarch described this as a communal endeavor, where social hierarchies blurred, allowing slaves and women to partake alongside citizens. Upon arrival at the Telesterion, the grand initiation hall capable of holding thousands, the rites unfolded in utmost secrecy, bound by oaths that promised dire consequences for revelation. What we know comes from fragmentary sources in Christian critiques, but it involved dramatic reenactments, the wandering of Demeter, the revelation of Persephone's return, and symbolic acts tied to grain. Initiates witnessed the kaikon, a barley-based potion possibly laced with ergot for mild hallucinogenic effects, evoking visions of fertility's renewal. This drink connected directly to storage methods. Barley from well-preserved silos was ground and mixed, underscoring how mundane grain sustained both body and spirit. The cult's hierophants, hereditary priests from local families, guided the experience, revealing sacred objects like ears of wheat, symbols of eternal life emerging from death. These initiations fostered resilience, teaching that just as stored grain endured winter's barrenness to sprout anew, human suffering led to enlightenment. In Attica's historical context, amid wars and droughts, the mysteries provided psychological ballast, with emperors like Hadrian later seeking initiation for political legitimacy. Votive offerings unearthed at Eleusis Minotaur Pythoi and agricultural tools highlight how participants linked personal vows to Demeter's domain. Yet, as the rites concluded with promises of a blessed afterlife, questions lingered about the cult's inner workings. How did these hidden dynamics influence broader Greek society, and what ultimate resolutions did they offer to the goddesses enduring grief? As the veils of secrecy lift in the final echoes of Eleusis, you arrive at the culmination of Demeter's cycles, where the mystery cults reach their profound resolution, blending agricultural endurance with eternal hope. By the classical period, the initiations had evolved into a rite of passage that not only honored the goddess, but also reinforced communal bonds in Attica, teaching lessons of resilience that echoed through history. The climax of the greater mysteries occurred within the Telesterian's dimly lit expanse, where, after days of fasting and procession, initiates experienced the epoptea, the things seen. This revelation, shrouded in mystery even today, likely involved a dramatic unveiling, perhaps a sheaf of wheat sprouting from barren earth, symbolizing Persephone's ascent and the triumph over famine. Historical allusions in Pausanias and Cicero suggest it instilled a sense of immortality, assuring participants that death was but a season, much like winter's hold on the fields. The resolution extended beyond the spiritual, impacting daily life and survival strategies. In Attica, the cult's emphasis on grain's sacredness influenced storage innovations, such as ventilated granaries in public buildings like the Athenian Propylaea, where surplus was safeguarded for sieges or poor yields. This practical legacy stemmed from Demeter's myth, where her withdrawal caused global barrenness, prompting humans to perfect preservation techniques, sealing jars with beeswax, using lime to absorb moisture, and rotating stocks to prevent rot. Archaeological evidence from sites like the Athenian Agora reveals state-regulated granaries, inspired by the goddess's teachings that sustained populations during the Peloponnesian War. The mysteries thus bridged myth and reality, fostering a culture where agriculture was ritualized, with initiates often becoming advocates for sustainable practices in their communities. The final outcomes rippled through Greek society, promoting unity and moral reflection. Women, typically marginalized, found agency in Demeter's worship, leading rituals that paralleled patriarchal structures elsewhere. The cult's decline came with Roman conquest and Christianity's rise, but its influence persisted in festivals and folklore, shaping Western views on renewal. Lessons learned: human resilience thrives in the mundane. The careful storage of grain mirrors our capacity to endure loss, emerging stronger. Today, as you contemplate modern agriculture's cycles, genetic seed banks echoing ancient Pythoi Demeters, story reminds us that hidden mysteries often hold the keys to survival, inviting reflection on how forgotten rites still nourish our world. Zeus edicts, meteorological observations, and patriarchal structures in Olympian myths. Picture yourself atop Mount Olympus, where the air is crisp and the clouds gather like silent witnesses to the edicts of Zeus, the king of gods whose thunderous rule defined the Greek cosmos. In the myths that shaped ancient thought, Zeus was the ultimate patriarch, his authority woven into the fabric of weather and society. His story began with rebellion against his father Cronus, establishing a hierarchy that mirrored the patriarchal structures of early Greek city-states. As you delve into this, feel the weight of historical observations, where storms were not random but divine pronouncements, guiding human behavior in a world of uncertainty. Meteorological observations in ancient Greece were deeply tied to Zeus, domain, with thunder, lightning, and rain seen as his direct interventions. From the 8th century BCE, poets like Hesiod described Zeus hurling bolts from the heavens, a metaphor rooted in real atmospheric phenomena. Farmers and sailors in regions like Thessaly and Boeotia relied on these signs. A distant rumble might signal impending rain, crucial for parched fields, while erratic lightning foretold chaos. Historical records from temple inscriptions at Dodona, Zeus' oracle, show priests interpreting oak leaves rustling in winds or bird flights amid storms as omens. These practices evolved from Bronze Age weather lore, where shamans observed patterns high, cirrus clouds preceding fronts, or halos around the moon indicating moisture to predict harvests or voyages. Patriarchal structures amplified this, with Zeus as the archetypal father figure, his edicts enforcing order among gods and mortals. In myths, he divided realms with Poseidon and Hades, asserting dominance that echoed the paterfamilias in Greek households, where men controlled inheritance and decisions. This mirrored societal norms in archaic Greece, where clans were led by male elders and women were confined to domestic roles, much like Hera's subordinate yet influential position. Vase paintings and epic tales depict Zeus' councils, where his word was law, reinforcing hierarchies that stabilized communities amid tribal conflicts. Yet, these observations and structures hid complexities. Zeus' meteorological signs often carried moral weight, punishing hubris with floods or droughts, as in the tale of Salmoneus. But what ambiguities lay in interpreting these edicts, and how did they uphold or challenge the patriarchal order in daily life? Building upon Zeus' commanding presence over skies and societies, you now explore the deeper interplay between meteorological observations and the rigid patriarchal frameworks in Olympian myths. By the classical era, around the 5th century BCE, these elements had solidified into cultural pillars, influencing everything from religious practices to governance. Zeus' edicts, manifested in weather, were meticulously recorded in almanacs and by philosophers like Aristotle, who in his Meteorologica analyzed thunder as air collisions, yet still attributed ultimate control to the divine patriarch. Temples dedicated to Zeus, such as at Olympia, featured weather vanes and altars where priests noted storm patterns, using them to advise on planting or warfare. A sudden gale might halt a battle, interpreted as Zeus' disapproval, blending science with superstition in a way that reinforced his authority. Patriarchal structures were equally entrenched, with myths portraying Zeus as the enforcer of male lineage and order. His numerous offspring, from Athena's parthenogenetic birth to the heroic lines of Heracles, underscored inheritance through the father, mirroring Greek laws where citizenship passed patrilineally. In Athens, the assembly of male citizens echoed Zeus' divine council, excluding women and slaves, just as the god marginalized figures like Metis, swallowed to prevent challenge. Historical texts from Herodotus highlight how tyrants invoked Zeus' paternal image to justify rule, while festivals like the Olympic Games honored him through male athletic prowess. Symbolizing disciplined hierarchy, these observations fostered resilience, teaching Greeks to adapt to unpredictable weather via communal strategies, building systems for rainwater or terracing hillsides against erosion, all under Zeus' watchful gaze. Yet, tensions arose, myths of Zeus' infidelities introduced chaos, questioning the stability of patriarchal edicts. How did these contradictions resolve in the broader tapestry of Greek life, leading to lasting legacies in the resolution of Zeus' edicts? You witness the climax where meteorological insights and patriarchal dominance converged, shaping Greek history's outcomes and enduring lessons. The Hellenistic period saw these elements peak, with Alexander the Great claiming descent from Zeus to legitimize conquests, his armies heeding weather omens before battles like Gaugamela. Observations advanced, with Theophrastus documenting wind patterns and humidity as Zeus signals, aiding navigation and agriculture in an expanding empire. This practical application resolved mythical abstractions into tools for survival, where patriarchs in Peleus used divine precedent to maintain order amid invasions. The patriarchal structures reached their zenith in philosophical justifications, as Plato and Aristotle rationalized male supremacy drawing from Zeus' model, influencing laws that persisted into Roman times. Myths' resolutions, Zeus quelling rebellions like the gigantomachy, symbolized harmony restored through authority, teaching resilience against natural and social upheavals. Outcomes included stabilized societies, but also critiques as later Stoics questioned divine patriarchy's fairness, reflecting today. Zeus' legacy in meteorology informs modern forecasting, while patriarchal echoes prompt examinations of gender equity. In a world of climate uncertainty, his story urges balanced stewardship, reminding us that edicts from above, whether storm or structure, demand wise interpretation for collective endurance.